All right, 7 o'clock and you're live.
Welcome, everyone. Today is January 19th, 2021, and today's meeting of the City of Oneonta Common Council is hereby called to order. I will call the roll. Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Risberger.
Here.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Here.
Councilmember Carson. Councilmember Harrington.
Here.
Councilmember Rafter may join us late. He is not present at this time. Councilmember Drenick.
Here.
Okay, everybody's here. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to start the meeting off with the annual State of the City address. Tonight's address is going to focus. I want to just give a brief recap of some of the things we've been through in 2020. Most of it is we're all very, very familiar with, so we won't spend a lot of time on that. And then outline some of the things that we've been working on this year to make sure that as we go into 2021, we are best prepared to be successful when the gates open. So with that, Carrie is going to magically get me virtually upstairs. And here we go. Good evening, Oneonta. What a year we have had. We've been through an awful time and an awful lot in the past 10 months. But one thing that I can tell you for certain is that the state of the City of Oneonta is one of strength, is one of resilience, and is one of caring. Hey, 2020 was a year that we will always remember, not only for the unprecedented challenges which it brought, but for the way the community came together to overcome those challenges. From the shutdown of the spring, to the SUNY outbreak of the fall, to this second wave of the winter, we have stood together and we're getting ourselves through this to the other side. I know that Oneontans are an independent-minded group. And I know from experience that they're not shy about telling you when they disagree with you. But when times are tough, we come together and we look out for each other. And I just cannot be more proud of the way the people of this city have come together for this entire year. On March 17th, I sat in this room for our last in-person council meeting. At that time, I spoke about there being many unknowns ahead, and we were facing a potential shutdown of all the things that we take for granted. I said at the time that we may be tested in a way that we've never been tested before. And again, I could not be more proud to say that I believe we passed that test, and we passed that test with flying colors. Here in Oneonta, we've kept our infection rate one of the lowest in New York State. And I want to say thank you to all, because we did it with a sense of self-sacrifice and a sense of caring for each other. And yet still, let us not forget that as of today, we have lost 23 of our fellow members of our Otsego County community. And to their families and their friends, we are all very saddened. Our Survive and Thrive initiative this year brought people of all walks of life together to support our local businesses with grants, with outdoor dining, with outdoor shopping, with marketing, and a new list of priorities to allow Oneonta to turn to thrive in the post-COVID world. And for that, to all that contributed, and there were so many, I want to say thank you. When the SUNY outbreak hit, we came together with the support of our County Department of Health, and I can't say enough for the hard work and dedication that they have shown. Along with Governor Cuomo, along with Chancellor Malatras, together, we stopped an outbreak of 700 new cases in a matter of 2 weeks before it could spread to one single person in the general community. And again, to everyone who helped, I want to say thank you. Our business community, with leadership from the Otsego Chamber and from Destination Oneonta, have been nothing short of remarkable. They've shown innovation and they've shown resilience, and probably most importantly, they've shown a we are all in this together approach. And to them, I want to say, thank you. The post-COVID world will certainly be different, and it will create new opportunities for new communities. When the doors open in 2021, Oneonta will be coming out of the gate running. The strong partnerships which we have built with our business community, with our friends in Albany, with our colleges, with our not-for-profits, will see us through and serve us well. And throughout the 2020 fog of COVID, we've been busy putting together all the pieces that are going to allow us to thrive in 2021 and beyond. We are now starting to see new signs and facades sprouting on our businesses on Main Street, about a dozen so far. By spring, you'll see dozens more, and we are very proud to be helping our local businesses in this effort. And in the spring, look to see new directory signs downtown as well. No community can succeed without a diversity of good quality and safe housing. We are now, and this has been a rough challenge for the city of Oneonta for more than 50 years, but we are now working with 4 local investors to help them in their efforts to turn vacant upper floors into quality market rate housing. And again, we are so proud of those who are investing in the city of Oneonta, and this has been a goal of ours forever. In partnership with New York State, Kearney Development, and Harper College, we look to break ground for the lofts on Deet Street this year. This project will provide quality, affordable housing for middle-income households, as well as artists. It will bring people, vibrancy, diversity, and customers to our downtown. And I want to talk for a minute about the Harper College Grain Innovation Center, because this is truly a win-win-win. It will provide our local farmers, brewers, and bakers with access to research and testing. It will provide the Harper College students with hands-on real-life experience, and it will bring new energy to Oneonta's downtown. And I want to say thank you to Harper College for believing in and investing in the future of the city of Oneonta, especially during these difficult times. At tonight's meeting, our council will discuss and I hope endorse a plan to demolish the structure that has been blighting the corner of Market and Lower Chestnut Street for decades, to build a new transit hub, and to do a total renovation of our Market Street parking garage. And here's a real challenge, but I think we're up for it. The Susquehanna River runs right through our downtown, yet the people of the city don't have access to it. In partnership with New York State and professional planners, we will undertake a local waterfront revitalization planning initiative. We're going to look for ways to allow the people of the city of Oneonta to have access to the riverfront. Just think walking, running, bicycling along the river. How cool would that be? We are partnering with the Greater Oneonta Historical Society, the Friends of the Oneonta Theater, and local investors to try to find a way to save that historic jewel. It is also very important to continuing the growth of the arts in the city of Oneonta, as well as our economy. And we will continue to work in partnership with the Otsego County IDA in working to develop the Oneonta Rail Yard into a center for economic growth and jobs. And yes, West Street will finally be repaved. And I will push to see that we finally build what has been one of the most requested projects in the city over the last couple of years, and that is creating a dog park in Neola Park. Finally, I want to talk about the importance of our two colleges, Harper College and SUNY Oneonta. Our relationships with both of our colleges are crucial to our success. The pandemic has demonstrated how, more than ever, it is important to foster positive and constructive involvement of our students in our community, along with how important it is to confront and prevent negative behaviors which disrupt our neighborhoods. I am optimistic that this year we have an opportunity, we've created an opportunity to reset expectations and set the bar higher for the future. The new relationships and communications that we've established with our college, working together to get through this difficult year, should help us find a way in the future to live together, support each other, and even party while respecting each other. This is now a time of opportunity for which we must not lose track. In closing, let me say that just like Rocky, the owl, we've had a rough ride this year. But we also survived, and in 2021, Oneonta is going to spread its wings, and we're going to thrive. And I want to say thank you to all in Oneonta who have helped us get through 2020 and for giving us much to look forward to as we move ahead. Thank you. Okay, let me catch my breath from running back down the steps. I want to say thank you to Sweet Home Productions for making this year's presentation look good, look official. And I won't say making me look good because that's a task I wouldn't even give to Mark Drenick. But thank you seriously, Mark, for your work on that. I'm sure that many people will tell me that the best part of the presentation was seeing the owl fly away. I do want to talk a little bit Was I on mute? Did you not hear anything I said? Okay. Start. Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay, I want to segue to discussion about return of our college students. The college students will be coming back. They've already started coming back. Harper College is pretty much back and in session for their J term. The SUNY, owning out the students, those are in the dorms, will be returning this weekend. They will be beginning classes shortly. And those who live off campus, some have already started to return and they will continue to return over the coming days. This is, as we all know, this is a time where all of us are feeling a great deal of anxiety. Our numbers are up in terms of positivity. Our hospitals capacity is in short demand right now, is in high demand and short availability. A lot of questions about the vaccine. People who are eligible, I hear from every day, they're not sure how to get vaccinated, when they'll get vaccinated, if they'll get vaccinated. And so all of this is happening while our college students are returning. So there's no doubt that we're all feeling a time of stress and anxiety. So I think it's important that just to give an update so we all are on the same page on how we're doing and how we're going to approach this year. I spoke with Acting President Craig over the weekend. I spoke with him again this morning. The number of students that are expected to return to the dormitories for the spring semester is much smaller than anticipated. At this time, I think it's approximately 650 students returning. Normal capacity of the dorms is over 2,000. So they will be at very low density. It is estimated, nobody knows for certain, but is estimated that approximately 1,500 students will return to live off campus. That combined total puts the total number of SUNY students who will be returning to Oneonta, whether on campus or off campus, at about a third of what would be a typical year. We have been working hard to gear up to make sure that we have good communications, that we have consistent messaging, that we are all on the same page. We are seeing that University Police Department and the Oneonta Police Department are in sync, working together and in strong communication. I have arranged tomorrow afternoon for a Zoom meeting with Dr. Franklin Chambers, key city officials, and those council members of the wards that have the highest density of students living in them. And I also have written a letter that will go to which will be distributed by the college to go to all incoming students, returning students, and their parents. So communication is good. We are going to have to continue that. We're going to have to make sure that we have a consistent message throughout, a message both about making sure that everybody gets tested on a weekly basis, a message making sure that everybody is aware of the importance of following all of the precautions that are mandated, and clear messaging about the consequences of not following them, which includes both health consequences to everybody, as well as consequences, disciplinary consequences for non-compliance. We will reinstate the control room, and a reminder, and we will begin to publish again the number for the health and safety hotline, which allows anybody to call in, whether it's anonymous or not, whether it's by phone or text, to report anything they see that they think constitutes a threat to public health. So, I am optimistic that we are all on the same page. I'm optimistic that we will all be working together. We all want the same thing, but there will be a challenge in front of us, as we welcome over 2,000 students, and plus the Harper students that have returned. So it's more like 3,000 students, more than 3,000 students back to the community. Diane may have some more information when she gives her report. Tonight, the first thing on the agenda, let me open my agenda here. Is we're going to see a presentation by Jenny and by Greg on where we're at with the demolition of the municipal parking garage and with the moving forward with the potential construction of a new transit hub. Before I turn it over to Jenny and Greg, I just want to give a little background. As you all know, the city contracted with Wendell, experts in the design of transit hubs, who presented us with two options along with preliminary designs and preliminary cost estimates. Of the two options, option one, which incorporates the transit hub into the parking garage, may be the less expensive, but it has several disqualifying parts to it. Probably the most serious of them is it would require the removal of between 50 and 70 parking spaces. And regardless of opinions about parking, and everybody has an opinion about parking, the reality is that in order to build that, we will have to go through a seeker process and a site plan review. The planning parking will be part of that. The planning commission will have to consider that. They will need hard and fast data that demonstrates that the city can remove another 50 to 7 parking spaces without a negative impact. I honestly and personally think that we do not have the data to support that. And the planning commission, doing their due diligence, would not approve it. In addition, option one provides less space for bus bays, so there is less efficient loading and unloading of the buses and lining of the buses, as well as smaller public space and staff space. But the final decision on the two options is actually likely to be as much as a year away. What we have currently are rough designs and rough estimates. The next step in the process is to hire architectural and engineering firms to make more detailed and final designs, engineering analysis, and cost estimates. So the sensible thing for us to do now, or the only next step to do, is to put out a RFP for an architectural and engineering firm. Review proposals for the purpose of moving forward with more detailed designs and better cost estimates. It is the recommendation right now of the staff and everybody that the sensible thing to do is to put out the RFP for a firm to go forward with the option two. That will allow us to learn more precisely what it will really cost, get a better handle on the design and the engineering challenges, as well as it will give us time, because it'll take probably close to a year to complete their study. It'll give us time to, find out if what additional funds we can secure from DOT. And I know that Ginny and Dave have been in communication with New York State DOT, and they have encouraged us to apply for additional funds and have given us a sense that there is a real possibility that we may be able to secure additional funding. We will also learn more about the $3 trillion in stimulus funding that the Biden administration is proposing. And we expect that in some form to move forward. We don't know how much money that would be towards the city of Oneonta, but that would help us as well. So this gives us time to finalize the plans, to know exactly what the costs are, to go after additional funds, and make a decision. Eventually, then the council's decision would be, first step would be, once we receive the proposals, awarding in a contract to one of these architectural and engineering firms. And then the second step would be making a decision on actually going forward. Once we know better what the cost will be, what the design will look like, and what additional funds we're able to secure. So with that, if there are no questions for me, if there are, I'll try to answer them. I will turn it over to Ginny and Greg. And Ginny's primarily going to demonstrate how we would go about paying for the project. Ginny, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and hello, everyone. On December 14th, Greg provided you with the link to the final Transit Hub conceptual planning study prepared by Wendell, and hopefully you took some time to review it. So to review the report in preparation of tonight's discussion. If you haven't looked at it yet, know that the link is available through the email that Greg sent. And as the mayor said, the goal tonight is to discuss the RFP, the request for proposal, to be issued for detailed design services related to the transit hub and the parking garage project. Issuing of the RFP will allow for an accurate estimate of how much the engineering services will cost. And once the results of the RFP are received, council approval will be required to award the bid. So I just want you to know that what we want to talk about tonight is designing the specs for the RFP for option 2. As the mayor said, that is the city staff recommendation. Also, a goal for tonight is to explain why our recommendation for option 2 is the one that we would like you to consider. The mayor made several good points of why option 1 would not be the best decision. But Greg would like to start out by showing you some pictures of what option 2 will look like. Greg, are you able to bring that up? And Greg will discuss with you a little bit about the layout and the goal of what you will see in the final project if option 2 is the way we go.
Okay, yeah, I think everyone probably recalls the two options just to make sure we're on the same page. This is option 2, which is showing the transit hub here on the 27 Market Street parcel. That's the rendering that Wendell created for that. And then just the plan view. As in all the options that were in the final report, the bus bays are out front here adjacent to Market Street, between Market Street and the parking garage. In option 2, which we're recommending, as the mayor mentioned, there's very little loss of parking spaces, so maybe a few spaces along the top edge here where enhanced pedestrian walkway would be installed to improve connectivity between Main Street, Market Street, and the transit center. But that is also optional. We could leave that off. And then if I scroll up to the enlargement, this is what the 27 Market Street parcel could look like with a proposed transit hub on that southeast corner, leaving this bulk of the parcel available for future development of a multi-story building. In the meantime, absent a developer coming in and saying they're interested in pursuing something in the near term, as part of this project, we can create some simple green space that could be used by the public in addition to a small plaza that would potentially remain in the event of a future development here and create this really, it's kind of a placemaking effort that we would try to do with, in addition to creating a transit hub, we'd be creating a place that is a public space people want to be at. It's attractive, coupled with the potential new development as well as the existing Clinton Plaza. This would kind of be the connection between Main Street and Market Street. Jenny, if you want
Okay.
to carry
Thank
on.
you.
there,
Yep.
just
Thank you, Greg.
a refresher.
You know, and as both the mayor and Greg have emphasized, the option 2 would be better for the city as a whole, for all of the reasons that they stated. And also it would encourage pedestrian movement from one area to the other and connect Main Street to Market Street. Also would provide connection to the parking structure, and we're hoping that it will also increase passenger activity on the transit system itself. And also, I'm not sure if Greg mentioned it, but there will be an elevator that will be installed for people to have easy access to the parking structure itself. And it, you know, it will allow the retail space and the storage space under the walkway. And it will also help to shape the character of the future development of the parcel adjacent that Greg was pointing out. And currently, the Wendell report, and with further consultation with them, the cost estimate for option 2 is approximately $15.2 million, with 9.5 being for the transit hub and about 7.5 being for the parking garage. Please know that option 1 or option 2, the general fund parking structures costs do not change. It's mainly with the transit building itself. However, these costs will be modified and be more accurately determined as the engineering design work is completed and as they study the project in more detail. And also, please be assured that the engineering costs for the RFP that we are discussing will be funded by grants. And based on the cost estimate for option 2 and the current grant funding that we have in place, we currently, it would require approximately 3.5 million bonding or additional sources for both the transit fund and also for the general fund. And so, and no, for a 20-year, 3.5 million bond issue at a 3% rate, that would be approximately $235,000 per year. So our question is, how do we pay for it? Well, first, we will vigorously look for additional grant funding from various sources. And as the mayor mentioned, we have been in contact with DOT. We have a 53 capital application that we want to pursue, and we want to request the maximum that we can and see if DOT will be willing to fund either some of it or all of it. Secondly, say we do not get any more additional grant funding, David and I have looked at different revenue sources to increase within the transit fund itself. And we have been able to feel very comfortable about raising an additional $235,000 to make the debt payment. We would be looking at rental income for the building space. We would be a 10% fare increase, or just increasing the fares from $1.25 to $1.50. Increasing advertising revenues, contract stops, intermunicipal agreements, expanding our services with the county, our 5311 operating aid, and various other sources from increase of ridership. We are very confident that within the next 2 years, we would be able to have that income growth. And for the general fund side, to fund the bond payment, we are looking for metered and permit parking within the garage, as well as metered parking in other public lots and on downtown streets. We have estimated that the revenue from this paid parking could more than cover the general fund debt payment. And we would also like to set up a parking benefits district reserve that for this revenue to be reserved for making the debt payment, maintenance, and improvements to the DRI area. So we're thinking long term, and by having those funds reserved, it will give the city many options for future maintenance of the parking garage, the streetscape, the parking meters, and the different various aspects that we will be installing in this development. And, it is very early in the process to provide accurate estimates, as the mayor and Greg both pointed out. But as the project progresses, we will be updating reports to the council detailing the cost estimates, the funding sources, the projected overhead costs for maintaining the building and the newly constructed buildings. And please note that as the project progresses, approval will be required at the various committee levels and the commission levels, and ultimately to the full council. So you will be involved in every step of the way of the progression of this project, and you will be very well informed by city staff as far as what is the next step to take. So does anybody have any questions? Katie? You're muted.
Ooh, me first. Okay. So I'm not sure who mentioned it during the presentation, but there was mention of a change in the bus bays between option A and option B. I guess I'm asking maybe David to speak to the what the difference is in terms of functionality between both options, please.
Greg, you want to handle that, or you've been in it more than I have on that part?
Well, there's really not much of a difference between the actual construction of the bus bays between option 1 and 2. There are still 7 OPT bus bays and 2 Trailways bus bays.
Okay.
It's more so the transit center being on 27 Market versus inside the parking garage.
Okay, so there's no like decrease in functionality with regard to OPT. Okay, that's great. So then my second question is maybe for Ginny and David, or should I let someone else go, or should I ask all my questions? I have 3 total.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Mayor, do you have a choice?
Okay, so my next question is with regard to something that Ginny had mentioned, which is the rental space and the increase in fares. I guess my question is, obviously renting out part of the building is dependent on the space, but with regard to the increase in fares and some of the other growth projections that you had made, is that dependent on the additional space, or, is it something that we can have that growth anyway for that transit fund without then the additional cost of the extra building? And that may not, oh, sorry, if you have, yeah.
As far as the rental, currently the Trailways is in the parking garage. That will be currently it's a general fund revenue. When it moves to the transit building, which that is what the plan is, then it's going to become a transit revenue.
Okay.
So that will be an automatic increase within the transit fund.
Okay. And so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I was just going to answer your second part. As far as the bus fare increases, yes, we could increase those anytime when, as far as the council's decision, with or without the construction.
Okay. So clarifying question now about the Trailways. So would they move, if we were to choose option A, would they move into the integrated transit hub, or like what's that plan look like with Trailways?
Yeah, and both options 1 and 2 Trailways would be moved into the new transit center adjacent, with OPT. So whether
Okay.
that where the Trailways is now would go away. That building within the parking garage would be demolished.
Excellent. And so, Ginny, does that still hold true that sort of no matter what, once we have a transit center, the Trailways funds will go into the transit? Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And so my third question is with regard to parking and parking meters and paid parking and permits and all those really lovely things that make me very excited that you were talking about, Ginny. My question is, how do all those things that you were talking about play into the comprehensive parking study that we had been talking about as a council a short time ago. We were talking about looking at parking in the whole city. And obviously this is a more focused conversation. But I know that, you know, we had talked about potentially hiring a consultant or something like that. And so I just wanted to sort of bring it back to that conversation and just ask where we were at with that and how it fits in.
Yeah, I can speak to that. You know, obviously you start with the downtown when you're looking at a big parking study. We're definitely still going to expand and look at the other aspects of that. But given the, you know, similarities with this project and that study, that's where we're focused on right now. Our next step is to meet with or have some virtual meetings with several companies who provide metering equipment and that sort of thing that help design these sort of systems and figure out what might make sense for the city at a staff level, and then sort of start to bring that to a committee level to further discussion. But metered parking, downtown parking permits, that's all just, those are two pieces of the puzzle.
Right. Okay. Final question. Because this is my first sort of major RFP that I think that I'll be involved in, or at least at a level where I feel like I can participate fully. Will there be flexibility with regard to design when it comes to the proposals that we receive, or are they basically going to tell us how much it would cost to build Wendell's design?
Well, Greg, I'll let you get into the specifics of that, but normally when RFPs are issued, specs are written by the appropriate people, which I'm sure Greg will be very involved in. And then however those specs are written is how the response will be determined.
Okay, I guess,
Yeah.
so, sorry, so just specifically my concern is that one of the main reasons for supporting the additional building is the address 27 Market. Okay. Is that, you know, it's sort of touted as a way to draw foot traffic from Main Street to Market Street. But I'm just noticing that I don't know that the plaza setup is the most inviting for Market Street. The landscaping totally closes off Market Street. And I'm just wondering how much flexibility there is with that. Because the way that it's designed now, I don't know that it accomplishes that goal. And so I would want to see something different done there personally.
Yeah, I mean, we're not married to the conceptual plan. It's just that conceptual plan. Once you get into detailed design, you know, whoever the architect engineering company is would work with us on that. There'd be more iterations of some drawings and discussion to be had before a final design is selected. So there's certainly time for changes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you
Katie,
for clarifying that.
Katie,
for
I
me.
just want to add to that, Katie, that part of the DRI plan and the funding for this
Mhm.
specifies a redesign of the walkway connection between the plaza and the garage and the transit hub. So that will be part of the RFP to develop a complete redesign of that. And that would include the entrance. You know, one of the things that I've actually been talking to Doug Decker about, he's a big proponent. He's been raising some money. He would like to see that area where we transition from from the plaza to the walkway, have a stage. What's the word for a small little stage with a little roof over it? I'm blanking on it.
Bandstand.
But he what's that?
Bandstand.
Somebody said it. A bandstand, yeah, a grandstand type of thing. Bandstand. He would like to see something dedicated to Jerry Jeff Walker. So he's been raising some money to go towards that. We may be able to combine that with the entire project. It would be a fairly small expense compared to the entire project. Our redesign of Main Street that took place 6 years ago included a bandstand at that location. The total cost at the time was about $20,000, but we couldn't afford it as part of that project at that time, so we scrapped it. So this may be an opportunity to reimagine that whole part of the plaza in conjunction with redesigning the entrance to the walkway.
Gotcha. Thanks for that info. Thanks, everybody.
David?
Thanks, Jenny. Just a quick question. You early on, you talked about the estimates of the transit hub. Can you tell me again what I got 9.5 million for the transit hub. What was the rest of the estimate? You don't need to go into the bonding. I managed to get all that, but it was
Okay.
before that. You were,
It's 5.7 for the parking structure area. So it's
Thank
9.5 for the transit hub, 5.7 for the parking. That brings it up to the 15.2.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Mark?
Thanks, Jenny. With the revenue projections, and you talked about rent, what rent are you projecting? Is that only for trailways, or is there thinking about having other rentable space located in this transit hub as well?
Both, Mark. We're right now in the numbers as far as coming up with the debt payment. We've only accounted for the rent income from trailways, but we will be looking for new customers, new clients that may rent for retail space or other space in the building. But it's too early to put a number to that, especially since we don't have any definite interest, in our possession at this time. But we will be looking at any possibilities as far, even for events, any type of use of the space.
So if I could follow up, is there any thinking about with those site designs or within this proposal, including any type of market rate housing in the second or third floors, other retail spaces further connecting Market Street and Main Street? That was kind of some of our original thinking about that site. I just want to know how much that thinking is still integrated or still part of this proposal moving forward.
Greg, I'll let you take that one.
Well, as far as market rate housing, that sort of thing, we really would need to partner with a developer. And I think we would all love to have someone interested in developing that parcel. At this point, I'm not aware of anyone that's come forward, but the idea with the design of a transit hub on the one corner would allow space for an additional building to go in the back corner along the, I guess, be the northwest corner. That could be, I could imagine like a 4 to 5 story, mixed use building going there. But the design of the transit hub, as shown in the conceptual plan, doesn't include any housing or anything like that. The type of retail space or some sort of commercial space that could be utilized really will get to the details in the detailed design phase, and we'll figure out exactly how much space and what that might be able to be used for, and see if there's anyone out there that's looking for something. So if you think of along Chestnut Street Extension, where the walkway is coming down from Water Street, it's a second floor walkway with an elevator that brings people down an accessible route. But beneath that, you've got some space there that would affront that plaza or whatever it may be that could be utilized by someone.
In Mark, also Wendell's design was actually interesting because where they're putting the transit hub would allow for building a mixed-use building, housing, retail, whatever it may be, not only around the transit hub, because the transit hub will be on one corner and go completely around it. I'm not an engineer, and Greg may say that this can never be done, but Wendell mentioned the possibility of building the transit hub building in a way that you could actually build not only around it, but over it as well, so that the transit hub would eventually become just a corner first floor of a larger building, whether that's cost prohibitive, whether it's realistic or not, but that was one of the things Wendell had spoken about, a possibility in using that location.
Thanks.
Mark?
Yeah, so there are just a couple of questions that I've gotten. They all come down to what it is that is going to be asked of the engineering firm. One is, if we go with the second proposal, which is the 2 buildings, the idea of purchasing your ticket and then walking in the rain or snow or whatever it may be to where the buses are, I think we've talked about that in previous meetings. I don't know that that is something that is currently indicated as solved within the context of the Wendell proposal. And I wonder if that's, first of all, something that we might be able to incorporate into the planning so that we, as we are providing it to engineering firms for in an RFP, so that this might be something that takes care of people in odd weather conditions that we have here. And then the other question I have, and it's problematic, moving from Main Street down to Water Street by way of Chestnut Street Extension means that you're walking downhill. The facing side to the Chestnut Street Extension in the proposed building is currently brick. And I'd like to think that while it might be an engineering feat to have retail spaces that are accessible off of that pitch to an incline, I'd like to think that we might pursue it as an option, and certainly some display, the idea of having some experiential connection, even in that short period of walking down Chestnut Street Extension, I think helps the downtown environment.
Thank you for that, Mark. I'm sure that Greg will take those comments into consideration when we're writing the specs. Is that correct, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely.
Len?
Thank you, Jenny. With regards to 27 Market Street, what is the total square footage of that building?
That I do not have. Greg, do you have that?
The proposed building,
Correct.
6,000 square feet.
And out of that 6,000 square feet, minus trailways, what is the rental square footage that you're calculating on?
I can't tell you that at this moment. That would be something we'd have to determine in the detailed design phase.
And then we're dependent upon a revenue stream, and I think Councilmember Davies started down this path. We're not sure what the rental square footage is for 27 Market Street, and or will there be any rental space within the parking garage?
Unlikely. I mean, it's possible that obviously you can fill in as much of the parking garage as you'd like, but the idea was to keep that building as small as we could while meeting the needs of Trailways and OPT to minimize the loss of parking. Whereas you have a little more flexibility on the 27 Market Street side.
Right. That revenue stream is unknown besides Trailways. And Jenny, was it $250,000 a year you thought the at 3% the bond payment on 3.5 million for 20 years was?
No, 235,000 a year.
235. Okay.
And just
so,
so, yeah, and just so you know, it's at 3%. My bond counsel told me that that's a very conservative estimate. Right now, the rates are coming in under 2%.
sure.
But because, I'm thinking that we will not be issuing this in, probably at least until 2022, if not 2023, I wanted to be conservative in the estimate. So I chose the 3% rate.
Right. And so we're going to create a new parking fund. Did I hear that correctly?
We would like to, yes.
Okay. And so between the transit fund, we'll be able to support some of this, of the bond payment. The rest would come from the newly created parking fund. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct. If if we do not receive more grant funding or other sources for the transit hub part, then the transit hub will have to take on debt. The parking garage, again, if we don't find any more sources, it would have to take on debt. Both debts would be funded in a different mechanism because one is the transit and one is the general.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you, Ginny. Thank you, Greg. You should be aware that Greg, Ginny, David Hoteling, and Judy have been working on this now for probably 2 years, starting with doing an RFP for the original contract that went to Wendell. So this has been a really labor-intensive, long-term effort to get us to this point, and we still have a long ways to go. It's a big project, and it doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a lot of consideration. But the next step is to take the preliminary designs that we have, which are only preliminary, and get architects and engineers to really work them out in greater detail, do greater structural analysis of the existing structure, and give us more that we have to work with going forward. And also we buy some time to continue to go after additional funds to pay for this project, which I think we have some reason to be optimistic we'll be successful at. So yeah, Len.
So Gary, what is the path that you're envisioning to go and get to the RFP? How are you seeing us do that as a council?
Well, typically that is something that staff issue RFPs all the time. RFPs do not typically do not require council approval, and they're not typically go through with the council. Certainly, I no doubt that Greg, who will be the key person working with David Hoteling, will be, and Judy, because she has the DRI knowledge, will be open to any thoughts that council members have on including in the specs of the RFP. I have no doubt that they will be open for that. The next step that will require formal action of the council would be, once proposals are received in response to the RFP, to approve the selection of one of the proposals for an award. And I think, as Ginny mentioned, this contract is covered by grant funds.
Yes, that's correct, Mayor.
And then the step after that would be, once the work of the engineering and architectural firm is completed, and you have the final design, construction documents, real cost estimates, then it'd be up to the council as to whether to proceed further with the project.
Right, Gary. But typically, aren't the RFP process you'll get as many interested parties as possible, but then city staff will grade them, and then council will basically just approve what city staff had already decided for who the awardee is. So I was actually trying to get to Councilmember Lepari's shoes point, is that will we actually be able to have interjection on the overall design of the layout of 27 Market Street? Because I share the same concerns of hers, that and Greg mentioned it too, without having a developer actively participating, I just hope that we aren't taking the wrong corner of that lot. That if maybe we had taken, northeast corner instead of the southeast corner, it would have worked out better for a developer. I just show some hesitancy there.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Certainly, I have no doubt, that Greg and the team will listen and take seriously all concerns or recommendations for inclusion in the RFP from any of the council members, no doubt. As to the location, we hired a company that has designed dozens or more transit hubs, large and small, all across the country. They are truly experts in doing this. the location on, and the design of the building and the location on that property was what they recommend, what they deemed to be the best location. None of us have, the expertise that they have, so that's what we hired them for, and that's what we trust them. But certainly recognizing that people who live here and have a perspective that sometimes an outside expert doesn't have, such as Mark Drenick brought up. I have no doubt that Greg and the team would welcome all input into the development of the RFP. Right, Greg?
Of course. And it shouldn't be assumed that once the RFP is awarded that a design is set. There's still a design process to go through. We're not going to select the final appearance or layout in the RFP selection process. That'll happen in the detailed design. So there will be more opportunities for council feedback.
Greg, you have more experience with this than I do, certainly, but I would imagine that when the architects and engineers dig into this, they themselves may come up with ideas that are different from the initial preliminary design that was produced by Wendell and say, wait a minute, we see problems with this, or we have an even better idea, correct?
Yeah, and that's, part of the point of going through the process, and not just, not only are we required to do it, but it makes sense to get some different perspectives, and I'd expect some other ideas. Sure.
So there's a lot of input, discussion. Nothing is, even the design we have now is not carved in stone.
Right.
Yes, Scott?
Maybe it's just a couple concerns, but when we're talking about the resources to help offset the 235,000 payment, I mean, there's a lot of variables in there. And going through this year with the pandemic and stuff, as we've seen, we can lose ridership monies, we can lose, a bunch of stuff. So, and there's no guarantee that we could expand the routes with the county. Is there, Dave?
We're working on that as of now. Yeah, we're working with the county we've already taken over Route 6. We're in negotiations right now to take over some possible other routes. But nothing's in stone.
Okay. I don't know. I guess my question would be, is there some of any of this that we can start doing now to start raising the money towards this project?
Definitely, Scott. David and I are looking at different sources, and for example, advertising. The past couple of years, we haven't been active in our advertising. That is something David and I have been discussing about increasing. And there have been years where we've brought in $60,000 to $70,000 in advertising. Right now, we're right around $8,000 to $9,000. So we have huge potential for advertising revenues. And because of the new buses and the different items that we've been doing for our advertising, we have a lot of potential there to make changes. So all of the ideas that I described to you, David and I have been actively talking about and pursuing. It's just going to take time, and that's why we've got the year from now before we really need to be concerned about the debt payment, if not 2 years. But yes, we are definitely acting on it now.
And to some extent, and this is an answer to Katie's question that she answered. I think you asked, even if we weren't building a transit hub, we could go out and increase advertising and raise bus fares and bring in more money anyways. But, and Jenny, feel free to tell me if I don't have it completely right, but our the way our OPT fund and contracts are designed, we really cannot make a profit. So there's no reason or motivation to go out and do a whole lot of to raise bus fares. There's really no reason to do so. There's really no reason for us to go work real hard to bring in additional advertising right now. Part of it is that our contract with SUNY states that if our revenue exceeds expenses, we refund money to them. So we're structured in a way that we can't, if we were to go out and raise fares now and bring in more advertising, it probably would add very little, if anything, to our account.
And just to expand on that, Mayor, we have not increased our bus contracts, stop contracts, and our different advertising contracts for a number of reasons. Some of what the mayor has just stated. But as all of you know, we receive 5311 operating aid to assist in any deficit funding that the OPT fund may need. We have not had to use that 5311 aid since 2015 because OPT has been running at a surplus. When OPT runs at a surplus, we need DOT approval of how to spend those funds. So it gets a bit complicated and there's a lot of detail into the numbers. And so we have, as the mayor said, we have a lot of different balancing acts that we have to coordinate with the different agencies, not only with SUNY, but also with the county and also with the state. So we look at the numbers in detail and take the necessary decisions for the projections that we have. Fortunately, during this COVID time this year, our surplus has helped us tremendously. And we'll be giving you reports on that as 2020 gets closed out.
I wasn't really talking about raising fares. I was more talking about maybe getting things started was like starting to bring in the paid parking again and get that project going first to see how it's going to be received by everybody. I'm just trying to think of future here, and that would start bringing in some money, so we kind of would get some idea what we could start maybe looking at in the way of revenue to start helping us. And I guess this might be for Greg, is how big is the lot of the old Oneon, the 27 Market Street? I mean, we're talking about taking 6,000 square foot. And I just want to make sure I get this right. We're still thinking we'll have enough room to still maybe build another building in there if a developer wants to.
Yeah, I don't have the square footage of the acreage off the top of my head, but there's quite a bit of room left on the parcel. You could build something there.
Okay, thanks.
Just to expand on your question on the paid parking, Scott, is this will take some time to finish the study and work with the consultants and to come up with a strong recommendation to the committee. It's not something that we'll be able to do quite quickly. And Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but it will take quite a bit of input.
Yeah, we'll be working away at that the next first and second quarter. I'm hoping to have something actionable by like midsummer timeframe. That's the goal. As far as the overall parking management plan for the city, not just paid parking, but to Katie's point, snow emergency parking and time limit, alternate side, reconsidering all of that and coming back with a recommendation. So
We also have
have to wait until after the transit hub's constructed to implement.
Yeah.
And we could look at going sooner, but it just takes a lot of thought and deliberate process. Sorry, Gary.
No. I was going to say we also have an agreement. It's not a written agreement, but it's an understanding with Kearney Development. They plan on leasing. This was all part of the site plan review, and the approval from the Planning Commission was based on their plan to lease spaces in the municipal parking garage for their tenants, because their tenants are not, or we do not want them parking in the Deet Street lot. They plan on paying us for that. We don't have a agreed upon price yet, but I'm going to guess it may be in the neighborhood of $50,000 a year.
One of the benefits of building the parking district reserve is to take all of those type of parking revenues, reserve them for the debt payment for future maintenance. And that money will build up quite quickly over the years.
Glenn,
Gary, will there be an option legally for us to sell the parcel or lease the land that's remaining out of the transit? Do we have those
Sure.
financial options? So by accepting grants and utilizing the grants, we don't negate those options of being able to sell 27 Market or lease anything of it.
I don't know that we could sell the transit hub
No.
structure. That's something that I doubt that, but I don't know the details on that. But the rest of the property is ours, and we can do whatever we want with it.
And just so you
Scott.
know, yeah, just so, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jenny.
I just want to say, if we do end up selling the section of the parcel that is undeveloped from the transit hub, it would be my recommendation that whatever that sale is gets returned to the general fund for the purchase price that we paid for.
Yes, Scott.
I got a question that kind of goes over to Mark Drenick. Have you heard anything from the business owners down on Main Street, how this project may help or may not help their business by any chance?
No, Scott, to tell you the truth, I haven't heard anything one way or the other about it. People are more concerned right now with, are they going to see anybody parking in front of their store and coming on in? I'm sure as I can get around and have some conversations with people, I can get at least some anecdotal answers for you, but at the moment I don't have anything.
All right. Thanks. I was just curious, Mark. Thanks.
The other thing that this project will do is, well, it's a small thing. It's also a big thing. It'll get the buses off of Main Street where they're lining up now. That is a problem in a number of ways. One, it's definitely not the safest way of doing things, but for vehicles or pedestrians. That's a very, very busy road and complex intersection, and having 7 buses pull away from the curb all at the same time, while it's very compliments to David, it's very well choreographed. It's like a dance that they do there. It's still, there's reduction in visibility. There's changes of lanes, all in a very complex intersection with pedestrians going in all different directions. So it will make that entire area safer. It will also, appearance-wise, as a gateway to our downtown, not have a lineup of buses being the first thing you see. And I am sure that the store business owners in Clinton Plaza will appreciate being able to be seen by cars passing by and not be hidden behind parked buses.
Are there any
David,
other questions?
Well, David Hoteling, you're probably going to be impacted upon this as much as anybody. Do you have want to share your thoughts on it?
Not sure which way to go here. I'll go on the safety factor and build on that a little bit. I can't believe we haven't had an incident out in front. It is a very dangerous way we do things. People are always crossing the street there from the corner. It's definitely unsafe. Being down on Market Street, I think we could have a much better controlled environment. I know that Mark has raised concerns about the canopy and passengers getting from the transit hub to where the buses will be stored, parked for loading during inclement weather. We've had a couple, suggestions, and I know that Greg has looked into those. So, I definitely would like to see us go with option 2. I just think it would be a better overall fit. It spreads us out more. We won't be so congested in that corner. I just think there'd be better sight lines coming off of Chestnut Street Extension without us being everything right there on that corner. That's just my opinion.
And also keep in mind, as we grow and have more downtown housing, and we have the market rate housing being proposed now by 4 different groups, which the city will help support, the lofts on Deep Street. We've also had some additional housing is already built and occupied. It is expected and even hoped that there will be an increased usage for public transportation. And that's a good thing. Greg was even talking to me the other day about the transit hub could even be a center for zip cars or car rentals as well. Because if we have more people living downtown that don't have their own car, they would use public transit. And when they need a car to go outside the city for some reason, they could maybe obtain a zip car at that location or some other kind of rental. Okay, if there's no more questions on it, Jenny and Greg, thanks for the presentation, but mostly I really just want to thank Jenny and Greg and Judy and David, because they have been plugging away at this for 2 years. And a lot of work has gone into it. The next step then will be to issue the RFP. Please feel free to contact Greg, if you want to have some involvement in the specs in the RFP. Please feel free to contact him and do so. And then we'll go from there. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I think we have a meeting to do today. My computer went to sleep. Okay. We're going to go to boards and commission reports, and we'll start with Parks and Rec, and that is Councilmember LaParche.
Yeah, so, let me go back to my notes. Sorry. Parks and Rec met on the 6th, I think it was, of January, the day after our previous council meeting. We had a new member, Libby Cudmore, who had been confirmed the day before, so that was nice. Nice to meet her and have her on board. We didn't have the full board, so we kind of pushed off the discussion on meeting date and time until oh, you know what? We did end up making a formal motion at the very end. Oh, that was my cat. I'm so sorry, everyone. Bear with me 1 second.
Sounds like a country song right there.
Wonders of Zoom.
Oh my gosh. So apologies. Okay. So yep. So they're going to be the first Monday of the month at 7 p.m. Going forward this year. We also elected to have actually chair and co-chair. So the new chair is Beth and the co-chair is Carolyn Marks. Lou gave her report. She's taking applications for this coming parks season, but we're obviously all very unsure of what's going on. So she sort of takes them with the caveat that they may end up being canceled and refunded. We talked about how awesome the Festival of Lights was. I got some clarification because I had some folks ask me, there was some land cleared in Neowah Park, and that was cleared for the dog park. Evidently that had sort of been in motion already. So that's ready to go. And it was really like this overgrown kind of gross area. So I think it's a big improvement. Let's see. Oh, we talked about hunting up near the reservoir, which I think is called the Wilbur Lake Dam. Am I wrong, Greg? Turns out that it's a lap. That's right.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. I've just always called it the reservoir my whole life. So it turns out that hunting is allowed in some places up there, and that there is a map that's available through the DEC. But what we decided, or what we learned, is that it's city land, but not technically a city park. So we don't really have any, the Parks Commission doesn't really have any, jurisdiction up there. So there is someone that we can contact at the DEC for potentially some better signage, just so that folks who are up there recreating and walking their dogs and things aren't totally startled by people hunting. There are 5-ish members of the dog park volunteer group, which is cool, including Leah, who runs Hair of the Dog, which I think was a very good partnership, and I'm very excited to see her involvement in that. We talked about the Veterans Walkway not being cleared in the wintertime. I feel like people are going to want to know this. So the reason why is that if you clear it, but then don't salt it, then it gets icy, and it can't be salted because the salt ruins the pavers. So we can't plow the Veterans Walkway in the winter because it's a safety hazard. You know what? That's it. We adjourned at 6:40. It was a great meeting. I'm looking forward to this year. We do still need at least, I think, one commission member. So if anyone is interested, please let me know. I know the mayor has a nice list to choose from, but the seat hasn't been filled. So anyone who's interested, please reach out. And that's it. Dave?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. As far as signage goes,
Yes.
who is leading the charge on that for contacting the DEC to get better signage?
You know what? That is a good question. I want to say that Lou and Greg were emailing back and forth about that.
I can follow up with Lou.
Right on cue.
I think she was going to give the conservation officer a call and talk about that. I gave her the contact info, but I haven't talked to her this week.
Okay, yeah, I think it's really needed. Both Katie and I have heard from constituents that have complained, and they didn't know hunting was allowed up there, and they were a little startled when they heard some shots. So the other question I have for you, Katie, is about the Veterans Walkway. What other options have been given then if we can't salt up there in case it does get slick, because people do walk through there in the wintertime? I mean, I know
Yes.
there's options out there, but have they decided on anything specific?
So we actually didn't talk about that. Basically, it's not plowed. And maybe Greg, I'm sorry, you can go more into this, but basically it's not plowed right now because it's sort of the lowest priority on the DPW list. And so, you know, they obviously are focused on streets and sidewalks and things like that. And because they can't get back there to consistently plow it, they would have to salt it. And since they can't salt it, they just don't plow it at all. And so we sort of left it like that it just doesn't get plowed in the wintertime. It was a piece of correspondence I think that Lou had received. And I think that she had reached back out to that constituent and they were fine with it and understanding. But maybe Greg can go into what some other options are. We didn't know any, so we didn't discuss anything.
I haven't been involved in that specific conversation this time around. We've had some questions in the past about the walkway along the mill race in Newell Park and other places in parks. And as Katie said, it's just really, for me, it comes down to manpower and, you know, our ability to take care of all the various responsibilities on a continuous basis. I think once you start maintaining something to a certain level, there certainly becomes an expectation, and we want to deliver on that. It just becomes difficult with the current staffing we have to keep up on all those things. So we can talk more about that if you'd like.
Well, no, I completely understand the manpower issue. My issue is I'm wondering how much of a concern is it, like how many residents are going through there in the wintertime on the Veterans Walkway. And if it turns out we have an awful lot that are going through there, and since I understand why we can't plow it, if we can't plow it on a regular basis, but it tends to get icy, there's some other things that can be done back there that are low maintenance. I mean, it could be putting down some kind of non-skid mats or like yak tracks type of things in certain areas. I didn't know if that was something that we needed to look into doing, something that could be laid out and just left. And that way it takes care of the slippage issue.
Let's, if I could intervene here, let's not talk about safety issues or plans for safety issues in this forum. It's not productive. If that's okay. Because if we start saying what's safe and what's unsafe and making determinations as to what's safe, and then we don't do it, and then we have, the alderman said that it was going to be safe.
How's that different from talking about putting salt down on the roads then?
We can discuss it in another forum.
Okay. So for now, we don't plow it.
We continue to not plow it.
We continue to not plow it.
Makes it ideal for cross-country skiers and snowshoers. Okay.
Yes,
Board of
thanks,
Public
everybody.
Service. Councilmember Drenick.
Board of Public Service held its January meeting on the 7th. There was old business that was we talked about last month, the smoke detector fire alarm certifications fee appeal at 22 State Street, which is a Catholic Charities owned home. It was a case of a badly filled out form and better documentation being needed. We got it, and the appeal was approved. New business, there was 10 to 12 Forest Avenue, which is a smoke detector fire alarm certification fee appeal. That's been tabled until next month, so the owner can attend that. 28 Academy Street, a smoke detector and fire alarm certification fee appeal. This is one of those cases where you know so many people in this community, in this this particular forum, the Board of Public Service, kind of gives you an insight into how sometimes folks can get chewed up in the gears of life here. Nancy St. Clair, who I personally love, universally, I think she's loved. She's been dealing with some health issues, and she didn't see any number of fees coming through and couldn't deal with them in any case. Her son, who lives across the country, has stepped in, and kudos to the board. All the fees have been waived. It's big, and in fact, on top of that, someone I won't name has volunteered to ensure that her walks are kept clean of snow. So Yay, community. 31 Fairview Street, a smoke detector, fire alarm, electrical, housing inspection fee appeal. This, there are 8 million stories in the naked city. This was a woman who unexpectedly, with the separation from her husband, was bequeathed the house to take care of, and she didn't know that, and had no idea that any number of things were in violation. And 6 months had gone by, and she was dealing with a pretty significant fee. Her appeal was approved. She'll take care of it. So it was a very nice meeting. 30 East Street. This is a case of an unsafe building, 30 East Street, at the request of the owner, who needs help in evicting the tenant, who's actually had their electric turned off, but is jacking power from the other tenant's smoke detector. Nice. The sort of tenant's not paying rent either. Garbage is all over the place, complaints of neighbors. So that has been ordered, vacated, and repaired in 30 days. And hopefully next month, I can tell you something very positive happened there for the neighbors. And I want to just quickly just do some highlights from the chair's year-end summary. I promised that I would do that. So it's a very nice report, but I'm just going to read the highlights. The board has developed a handbook to aid current members and to facilitate the recruitment and training of new appointees, which I really appreciated. In 2020, some statistics coming now. In 2020, the board heard 9 appeals for water and sewer rents. All of the appeals were denied. The board asks that a statement or newsletter be included in the annual water quality report, urging property owners to be aware of their water usage. The board declared 19 properties unsafe. 7 of these were at the request of the owner, similar to what I just read you. In each case, the board ratified the decision of the code office, declared the property unsafe, and ordered the structure vacated, demolished, or repaired. The board considered properties to be designated as blighted. The following properties, I'm going to read these off because they're in various people's wards and you should know where they are. The following properties are so designated and ordered to negotiate a restoration agreement with the city or face a fine, and they include 3 to 5 Walling Avenue, 102 River Street, 77 East Street, 62 Elm Street, 13 Baker Street, 14 Chester Street, 40 River Street, and 36 Cherry Street, 10 Division Street, my next door neighbor, and 503 Main Street. It should be noted that several have also been declared unsafe. The board received 14 property-specific appeals, and 5 appeals were denied. 9 of the appeals were approved on all or in part. Of the appeals granted, the approval often rested upon the failure of a single inspector who serves on the electrical board to submit the paperwork for the inspection in a timely fashion. And the chair has communicated with that inspector. 3 snow removal fees were considered. 1 of the fees was removed. 1 unsafe tree at 18 Cherry Street was ordered to be removed. As of this date, that has not yet occurred. And finally, publishing a newsletter. This is a reiteration. Publishing a newsletter that would have educational information about water rates, meters, conservation, and our efforts to make city dwellings safe to be included in either with the annual water quality report or in online data, or both. And that's all I have to report.
Any questions? Okay.
Len?
Oh, Len, go ahead.
Thank you, Gary. Mark, is that a report that you could share with all of us? I don't
Certainly.
actually chicken scratch fast enough to catch up with everything that you gave us. I think it's actually wonderful that you did a complete annual report, and thank you for doing
Oh, I
it.
did not do it. I did not do that. That's the
Oh.
chair.
Oh, okay. Well,
The-
thank the chair for us.
all of
That's
the-
excellent.
He's good.
All of the, all of the boards and commissions are responsible to submit an annual report every year on what they've done in the course of the year. And those do get posted on the city website. So Carrie will be working on that, I'm sure. Thank you, Councilmember Drennick, and thank you for telling us something about your age in talking about the 8 million stories in the naked city. Only us older folks understand that. Okay. Let's go
Well, thank goodness I'm in the
to,
Luke club on that one, Gary, because I actually didn't know that one. Thank you, Luke.
Google it. Let's go to the environmental board. Councilmember Davies.
Thanks, Mayor. The Environmental Board met last Wednesday. So they started by recognizing the contributions of two longtime members, Dave Hutchison and Lucille Wiggin, who will no longer be serving on the board. They also welcomed 3 new board members, so that was very exciting, a lot of new blood on the Environmental Board. We heard committee reports, and then there was kind of an orientation session for the new board members where we reviewed several of the larger kind of environmental actions that continue to shape the city, those being the Oneonta 2030 Sustainability Plan, climate smart communities efforts that are kind of adopted by the city. And while others may have been treated to annual report, we actually got a 50-year report from Dave Hutchison about the history of the Environmental Board, which was frankly quite interesting and reaches all the way back to the early 1970s. At the same time, we also elected a chair. Kevin Schultz will continue in his role as the chair. And that wraps up that. We have another meeting coming up in February.
Thank you, Mark. Did you get out of that meeting by midnight?
I think it was by 8:30. Informative
Good.
meeting.
Okay. City Health Officer, Dr. Jorgensen.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I will try to be brief. Okay. Worldwide, we are now at nearly 94 million confirmed cases, close to 10 million more than when I reported last 2 weeks ago, and over, sadly, 2 million deaths worldwide. In the United States, we continue to be the biggest single contributor to the worldwide number at now 24 million, which represents 4 million more than when I reported to you 2 weeks ago. And sadly reached a milestone, as reported by the New York Times, of over 400,000 deaths today. The good news is maybe the increase is leveling off to some degree, while deaths, however, continue to increase. Here in New York State, we're actually increasing more than the country, continuing to average about 15,000 cases a day, which represents a 10% increase. We now have 1.2 million cases reported and over 40,000 deaths. Here in the Mohawk Valley, our positivity is greater than the overall state positivity, which is 6.3%. Our 7-day positivity, 7.8%. The county is a little bit lesser than that average, 7-day average of 5.2%, but this does not reflect today's numbers, which, as you see, showed a big increase. 80 cases were reported today. That's the highest since we had the SUNY-related student outbreak last September. 21 people are hospitalized. Talking to the county this morning, in terms of Oneonta, unfortunately, we still do not have city-specific numbers, but they assured me there is no cluster here other than 27 cases being reported in residents of the Fox Hospital nursing home. They did tell me that there are also high numbers of cases out of Richfield Springs and Lawrence, so it's pretty much the whole county. Regionally, 3 deaths and in Delaware and 2 in Chenango County were reported in the Daily Star today. We have had no new deaths in Otsego County, fortunately. This is just more from the Otsego County dashboard. You can see how we now have over 250 active cases, which I believe to be an all-time high. And here's a graphic of the number of positive cases, which, as you can see, has shown a big spike. And we'll continue to watch that. Other news locally, Fox Hospital this morning reported 13 COVID inpatients. That's the most I've ever been informed of. And they are almost, they have a very high census there, and some struggles with staffing because of that. Overall, in the Bassett network, as of this morning, 55 COVID patients were hospitalized, which is about what they've been averaging. Wastewater reports from Greg. We did get reports from the 7th, the 11th, and the 14th, all of which showed quantifiable levels with some degree of variation. And I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that in any more detail, Greg.
No, that's okay. Thanks, Diane.
Okay. For some reason, Otsego County is no longer on that map graphic dashboard that the people doing the work are putting out. So if that comes back, I will continue to share that with you in the future. Some discussion of the colleges. Gary, I think, very correctly discussed the fact that we're working hard and I think productively with our colleagues at SUNY Oneonta to help assure that the return of students is as safe as possible. This email just was sent out late this afternoon. I hope you can read it, but it is basically the third iteration of their plan for testing students, their revised plan for testing students as they return, and I think reflects their careful planning in this regard. Their initial plan was, as Hartwick does, was to have all students be tested and produce a negative test result before coming back to campus. But recognizing that was not achievable for some students, they have this plan in place now that for students who cannot obtain testing, they will be immediately escorted to the testing site and tested before taking residence, which I think is a really good move. A previous plan had given them 5 days to test, and I think this immediate testing makes a lot more sense. They will quarantine until that test comes back negative. The one concern, of course, I think as we all share, is that there is no testing mandate for those off-campus students who do not come onto campus for any reason, who are simply in the community doing everything online. And our colleagues at SUNY are assuring us everything is being done to encourage testing. There will be, in the next week, hours open every day, including the weekends, for pool testing. And again, the off-campus student population are being targeted and encouraged to take part in that testing. And the team up there is actively working on putting out communications to the off-campus students regarding expectations around behavior, consequences for behavior that is outside of the norms and the law. And they've been working directly with landlords as well. So I think we're optimistic that everyone's doing everything we can to assure the return of SUNY students is as safe as possible. I did talk with the folks at Hartwick today in the health center. Hartwick students came back for J-term this week, and they also had a testing requirement for students before they arrived. That did result in a couple students delaying their arrival because they tested positive, and another couple students who weren't able to obtain testing who were tested immediately on arrival and actually sent home. Their plan involved not only having students come with a negative test, but having to quarantine for 3 days and then being tested on day 4. With that strategy, they did identify 8 positive students. So they are all quarantined. They have been quarantined, in fact, since they arrived. So I think that that just shows that plan is working. Both SUNY and Hartwick are going to do weekly ongoing surveillance testing for their students as well as their staff. And I think that should also hopefully help to reassure us. And a little bit about vaccines. Here's some data from the state website, which I think is fairly up to date, that tells us statewide over 1 million doses have now been, or close to 1 million doses have now been administered. In the Mohawk Valley, you can see our number is a little over 20,000. What has been problematic, I'm sure you are all aware, is how people are achieving their vaccinations. As you know, originally the vaccines were limited to those people who were frontline healthcare workers and nursing home residents, and then gradually the eligibility was expanded, and then very quickly on the 11th and 12th, eligibility included a much broader numbers of people, such that then the ability to get a vaccine became very difficult. So what's happening now, and what this first slide hopefully will help us with, is how to get a vaccine. Part of the problem is, even though all of these people are eligible, there are no appointments to be had in terms of the people that are administering vaccines, which include pharmacies, the health department, and our hospital systems, do not know until a day or so before they get vaccines how many they will be getting. So therefore, they cannot open up those appointments for people. What I learned today was that there will be no new vaccines delivered this week at Fox Hospital, so no clinics there. Bassett Medical Center will be getting a number of 600 vaccines, and according to my contacts at Fox, they plan on setting up some clinics for the weekend for community members. So this first slide here with this link is how you can go directly to the Bassett website to make those appointments. As of late this afternoon, they were still not available, but here's where that link takes you to. And then if you scroll down, you can see there are different clinics within the system that all you have to do is click on them, and they will give you appointment times once they exist. So hopefully, I'm hoping that having that information, and Carrie, hopefully you can help me do this, get that link to the Bassett vaccine site up on our website. People will at least know that's something they can continue to check. And hopefully there'll be some additional community availability for the hospital network doses. They are, however, charged with first and foremost making sure all of their healthcare workers are immunized. So in terms of the county, as of this morning, they had still not heard, but they were anticipating that they'd be getting some vaccine this week and be able to soon have another clinic. They had 2 clinics last week and immunized 200 community members. What happened there, and the way they let people know, was to put out a press release, and within 5 minutes, when people called the number in the press release, all appointments were full. So here you have on the bottom, the Otsego County Department of Health link where you can sign up, as well as the phone number. And the phone, it's confusing because the phone number isn't actually on the website. So that's why I put it here. When you go to the website link, right now, of course, there's no availability. They have no clinics open. Once they do, hopefully, you can use the link to make an appointment at their clinic. Where you see now, if you click that now, it takes you to Rite Aid, which then eventually after waiting tells you there is no availability. And then looking above, when you go to the New York State Department of Health website, it does take you to some links for state sites that are opening up. So that is one other option. For people who are not comfortable navigating the website, there is a vaccine hotline, which is manned during the day for people to call in and hopefully be guided through this very confusing process. Also on the state website is where you get guided through the MI eligible process to confirm and affirm that you are eligible. This is what the Otsego, if you go not first to the health department website, but if you simply go to the Otsego County website, you see in the lower left corner that little red COVID vaccination clinic link. So that is one other way to access it. I think that is all I had, unless there are questions. Len, I think you were first.
Thank you, Diane. I apologize if I missed it, but out of the 61,000 residents that we have in Otsego County, how many have been vaccinated today?
I don't have that number for you. It was just the Mohawk Valley that I was able to access. I can see if that number exists and let you know.
And is there a plan coming down from the state that is going to speed this process up?
I think the speed is limited by the availability of vaccines. And the federal government is the source, the only source at the present time for vaccines in New York State. So I have all faith that the federal government will be releasing more. I saw that our governor had directly requested or been exploring with Pfizer getting some vaccine directly, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. I think it's all in the hands of the federal government now and how much they're going to release to the state, which in turn determine, and the state determines how it gets allocated from there. Does anyone else?
So with the limited supply that's coming to New York State, how does Mohawk Valley rate? I mean, how do we qualify to get the vaccines?
Well, I can tell you, Len, because I'm on that call with both the vaccination task force and the control room, is I am told that it is distributed across the state to regions and counties based upon per capita population. I am being told, I can't verify it, that every region gets the same number per capita. Now, one of the things to recognize, I know the New York State's been taking a lot of heat for the way it's been rolled out, and there are some legitimate concerns on communications that have taken place. But as you know, Diane pointed out, one of the things that took place was New York State's decision to suddenly increase to those who are over 65 and to include college professors was based upon an announcement the day before by the federal government that they were going to release the entire stockpile immediately. 3 days later, they said, it turns out we don't have a stockpile. And so now the state had already, and New York State's not the only one involved, probably half the states in the country went ahead and based upon the announcement from the feds that CDC recommended lowering the eligibility rate and the simultaneous announcement that the feds were going to release their stockpile immediately, open the floodgates, only to be surprised when the feds said, it turns out we don't have a stockpile. So it's a mess. There is just not the availability of the vaccine that everybody hoped there would be at this time. And how fast we'll get here, I have not been able to get any information on it yet. I don't think anybody at the state level knows. As was mentioned, the governor is trying to contract directly with Pfizer because Pfizer did not take the Operation Warp Speed subsidy money, which means that they are not, don't have any agreement with the state because they didn't take that money. They don't have any agreement with the feds that they can be the sole purchaser from them. While the companies that did take the subsidy money are bound to only sell to the federal government.
Dave?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind though with Pfizer is even if we do suddenly get a number of vaccines from Pfizer, I don't think there's any area within an hour of Oneonta that can actually store it. So we'd probably have to drive to Binghamton or Utica for it. The question I have, Diane, is out of the 80 cases, you said 27 were from Fox Nursing Home. I'm still concerned because that leaves 53 additional cases, and we have been steady around 20 to 25, I'd say, for quite a while. So, you know, for sure, were there were spikes in or clusters in other areas, and that accounted for this, or we just don't know exactly what the reasoning is for that jump?
I cannot say with certainty. When I spoke, it was this late this morning when I actually spoke to the health department. I didn't know they were going to have 80. And I don't know.
To be honest, when I saw that number.
Yeah. So, but they did, again, I think she must have had a sense because she kept telling me, yeah, the numbers are really going up. So, but I know that 27 nursing home residents doesn't include staff. And I know some staff were positive. I know, I'm not sure where in the county all staff people live. But I was assured that it was fairly widespread throughout the county. If I get more information, I will let you know.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from residents is when they hear from the health department that this is just widespread, you know, wear your mask. It's not really reassuring when you've got a big jump like this and people want to know, did this happen at a certain location, and is it possible that I was at that location, or you know, my elderly parents were at that location? So I'm disappointed at the level of information that the Department of Health is not giving out anymore, as well as you know, I know a lot of my constituents are feeling the same way.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more, Dave. And I continue to advocate that they make that information available. Our county reps are advocating for that. And Dave Bliss and I have both requested through the state whether the state has that data by zip code and can provide it to us, and not having to go through the county. We haven't heard an answer yet on that, because Dave also supports that information being put out there. On a related issue, when I spoke yesterday with President Craig at SUNY, I asked that it be made certain that the public has access to the results of the swab testing that SUNY is doing on campus. Because it's never been clear whether all of those go through the Department of Health. In the fall, that was never clear.
Right.
So at least we would like to be able to have access to the results of the swab testing and know how many college students are testing positive through that process.
My hope here, if this is really a case of staffing levels being the problem, and that's what I've been hearing, I hope at the very least that the county board learns from this when they consider how much investment they want to put into our county Department of Health in the future. I've worked for 8 different Department of Healths throughout New York State. And I think ours in Otsego County is the lowest staffed I've ever contracted with.
So, wait, I just have a couple things in response. I did talk to them again this morning about the whole issue of getting more city-specific data. Back in August, they had a link where you could click on it and it showed you a whole map of the county, and then you could subsequently click onto the city, the town, each city, and they thought it was still, it took a while of asking around until they finally told me, well, that just doesn't exist anymore. My assumption being is no one's entering that data anywhere, but I will keep asking, and I continue to advocate for that. There is a link I will share with all of you that has been ongoing in terms of recording all data from SUNY in terms of their pool testing. That exists. What it doesn't show when you look at it are test results, positivity in students that were not tested through their pool testing. So when you look at Oneonta, the numbers are very strange because they're about half of what we know the outbreak to have been, but that's because so many of our students were tested off campus. But I will make sure you guys have that link because it's been there all along, and I have found it useful because they also tell you how many employees have tested positive in any given week. But again, I'll make sure you get that. I think there was one more thing, but now, one more thing I wanted to say, just in terms of, and this sort of came about as an aside today in my discussion with them but they did tell me that they have now almost, that was their term, almost 100 positive cases that they have linked to the copper fox outbreak we had in December. So they are keeping track of where these cases are coming from, even if they're not publicizing them to us. I think for me, that gives me cause to be still concerned about the bar scene in Oneonta. They did put out a notice on the 15th that a bartender from the 6th Ward Athletic Club had tested positive. Some of you may have seen that. I'm not sure they necessarily have identified a cluster from there. It was asking people, that had been there during the dates when that bartender worked to let people know or to, be aware and get tested if they're positive. So, I mean, in their defense, I think they are trying to identify where cases may be coming from and acting on that information. Mark?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Benny. So I got three different concerns. First off, I really want to echo Dave Risberger's concern about the reporting, and Diane, as you've been saying as well, Mayor, as you've been saying, there's got to be a workaround. With a lack of information out there, there's no question, I've been looking at it on my social media feed, that the folks are making up their own information. We've been working really hard, a group of folks and myself, to kind of repair the town-gown relationship and build it back better. And that is going to be compromised absolutely by the fact that we have students that are now returning to Oneonta and are not being mandated, and I understand why, but nonetheless not being mandated to take tests, and so we don't know. So I'm very, very, to me, it's about the most important thing we can do is to put information out there. We have, and not to be self-serving about this, but we were lucky, my company was very lucky in receiving PPP back in the day when we really, really needed it. And we used that money to allow ourselves to build the Support Oneonta site. On that site, we continue to put every single day, every link, the links that you mentioned here, Diane, that we don't have, are going up there as well. It's a pretty rock solid resource. It's not a revenue generating resource. It's a resource for the community. It's a free piece for the community, and be a smart thing, I think, for people to become aware of it if they're not. Having information is really a key for us. The other thing that's a key for us is we have a mask mandate. We have signs all over town. I don't know what our OPD's take on enforcement is going to be now that there's a new internal infrastructure of administration there. There's a 3-day event being planned across the street at the Red Jug Pub. And I don't think I have to make any case for myself as being pro-business downtown, you know? So I'm not looking to hurt somebody's business here. But they're doing a birthday bash for anybody who's had a birthday in the last 6 months. Come on in. That has to be enforced. Our mask mandate, our social distancing mandate, all of the mandates around how many people can occupy a bar space, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I don't know if someone has had a conversation with the new hierarchy at the OPD, but I would hope that this is something that they're going to take extremely seriously. It's right across the street from them. We have a county rep who means well, but is continuing to tell people to stay home. Yeah, stay home. There's 70% more infectious out there. A lot of people out there don't get it. Stay home. But we can't stay home if we're going to keep our businesses in business. So having good information so that we can say in Oneonta, in the city of Oneonta, and yes, that was that map that included all of Otsego, and you could break out the town of Oneonta, and we pushed really hard to be able to get the city numbers. To be able to say that empirically, this is what's going on in the city. It's safe. Wear your mask, go shopping, pick up your food, whatever it might be, get back in your car and go home. Don't just stay home. They're hanging by a thread out there. And information and enforcement, those two things, I can't be advocating more strenuously here.
But Mark,
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify for a second, Diane, did you mean Red Jug Pub because you said across the street from OPD, or did you mean Reds? You're muted. Yeah, I'm sorry. It may very well be Red Jug Pub. I'm thinking, Reds. It could very well be Red Jug Pub. Either way, it's not that far away. Okay. And they're all over social media. And again, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's business, but we got to stay safe. Okay. Yeah, I'll check with OPD to make sure they're aware of it.
And so I think, Mark, you made a lot of good points. And I think there are many, many good reasons to want to have better data and more information about Oneonta. But I would still argue, no matter how low our numbers are, and they were running, as low as 2 to 3 a day, you can't say it's safe to be in downtown Oneonta because Oneonta residents there's low positivity among our residents because many people work in the city who are not technically city residents. People are coming to the city that are not city residents. So I think it's a little bit, you have to be careful in using the data to be reassuring that it's never going to be safe until this virus goes away. And right. I just would be very careful in messaging that.
Diane, and I get that, but it's marketing. And yes, empirically, factually, you can absolutely make a case. But there's nothing like a graph that shows people where we are relative to where and it's also a great reinforcement of doing the right thing. Our numbers are low.
No other questions for me?
I think we may have lost the mayor temporarily.
Uh-oh. Okay.
So the meeting is over.
Meeting's not yet over. If you want to give us a few moments. We're having some technical difficulties. We'll be right back with you.
Sure.
Hey, Carrie,
Yes, Diane.
so since you're there, all those links I put up, did you see them? You want me to send them to you?
Yeah, if you could send them right over and then I can work to get them on.
Great. Thank you.
I'll be right back with you all.
Jenny, did you have a question?
Yeah, if I'm allowed to ask a question, the mayor's not here for me to ask. You said that the information at the county website is not inclusive or complete as far as the phone number and different things like that. Is there a way, and this would be a question for the mayor and for Carrie, for the city's website to be able to provide links or the information for the people to get the accurate information for or from?
Yes, that's exactly what I was just asking Carrie to do.
Okay.
Put those numbers up there. And also, Carrie, if you're there, what I'd really love if you could, because I know you've done this before, is ask the county if you can, when they put out those press releases saying, oh, we're opening a clinic now, whether you can be in that list of people that get it. I think maybe you are already.
I think Carrie's working vigorously to get the
Carrie's
mayor
trying to
back
get
online,
back.
so you
Yes.
can't be doing two things at once.
Okay, sorry. Okay. But yes, Jenny, we will make sure that's all on the city's website.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, while they were working on that, does anybody else have any questions for Diane? Luke?
Folks, I'm so sorry. My internet's been so wonky today. So if it's cuts out, don't worry about it. Dr. Jorgensen, have you heard anything about this new strain that's been announced? Is there any data on that strain that's out there, or is it kind of lumped in with the other COVID statistics?
Diane, you're muted.
I did the opposite. Okay, we had a brief presentation on this at the New York State Health Department provider webinar last Thursday. And the Wadsworth lab, which is a state testing lab, has begun to do a little bit more testing specifically for this UK strain. I think it's B117. But the important thing, I think, to understand is that a very small percentage of COVID positive cases have genomic sequencing done. So we really don't know for certain how prevalent it is. But that being said, they have identified, well, as of last Thursday, there were 14, I'm sure there are more by now, of that variant in New York State that have been identified. The most, I think 9 were from Saratoga, so there's definitely been a cluster there, but some have been downstate. What I continue to hear is that it is significantly more transmissible. They know that from public health
Hello.
in Great Britain. Hey, Gary.
Okay, I'm back. At least by phone. I don't know what happened to the computer. It shut down.
Luke was just asking about the new United Kingdom variant, so I was just giving a little update on that.
Okay, go right ahead.
So there have been, a number of cases in New York State and in many other states. The take home, I think, is still that it is definitely more transmissible, but has not been shown to cause any more severe illness, hospitalizations, or deaths, but simply by being more transmissible and causing more cases could certainly lead to that. That's still what I'm hearing. It's what Fauci said the other day on TV. There are a couple of other variants, one from Brazil, one from South Africa. Again, the United States is behind many other countries in terms of the percentage of genomic sequencing we're doing on our COVID, but it's certainly being looked at. And I think that as the pandemic evolves, we will continue to see variants. And I mean, that's just what the virus does. It mutates. What I've heard is that the current vaccines should be effective, at least against the UK variant. Pfizer has tested in the lab to assure us of that. But you know, a year from now, 2 years from now, we may need to tweak the vaccines a little to account for these variants. Does that answer your question, Luke?
Yes. Very much.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we're ready to go to the consent agenda. I'm sorry that I don't have video here. I don't know what happened to my computer. It suddenly died. Okay, I'm going to read through the consent agenda.
Excuse me, Mayor. We still haven't
Yeah.
done committee. We haven't done committee reports yet. Legislative and finance.
Oh, thanks. I jumped ahead on Diane's report.
Yeah, I figure you
Okay.
jumped ahead just so Diane could have the option to go and relax.
Okay. All right, thanks for pointing that out. Legislative committee. So are you going to do that, Dave? I don't know if John
Yes,
is joined or not.
I'll
I
do
can't
this
say.
I'll do this for John since he's not here.
Yeah.
Legislative met on January 11th. We had 2 items on the agenda. The first was the fire hydrant snow removal. This is something that Stephen Yearly brought to us. It was a potentially adding to the city code to require people that had a fire hydrant adjacent to their property would be responsible for digging the fire hydrant out. And we had some concerns with that, just because if you have somebody that's elderly, they're going to really struggle digging those hydrants out, especially after the plows go through and you really have packed in snow. So we put a hold on that, I believe, and Katie and Luke, jump in here if I misremember this, but I think Greg was starting to look at possibly looking at flags to identify these hydrants. And the reason why this came up is because at this last storm that we had, one of our plows took out one of the hydrants. So we want to try to minimize that, of course. But if it's an issue of not knowing where the hydrants are when the plows are going through, a flag would at least help them out. But the other concern, of course, is that flags can be stolen. So we're working on this. So there'll be an ongoing discussion about this, I'm sure, at the next meeting. The other one was a beekeeping ordinance we've been discussing, and Stephen has provided us with a possible bee ordinance. We still have some concerns about this. We're talking about potentially partnering with a beekeeping group if we go through with this, but there's concerns about bees and chickens are a little bit different. We allowed chickens, but bees, there's a whole different set of concerns, mainly around allergies. So this is something else we're probably going to continue discussing. And if anybody has any input they want to provide us or members on the legislative committee to include, feel free to contact either Katie, Luke, John, or myself, or if people that are listening to this meeting, reach out to your ward representative. And that's all I have, unless Luke and Katie want to jump in here and have anything else they want to add that we talked about that I missed.
I think you did great, Dave.
Okay. Thank you. We've got Finance Human Resources Committee. Len, do you have a report on that?
Thank you, Gary. We met January 11th, and we only had 3 items on the agenda, which is a very short list, which was kind of nice in one sense. But our first topic was paid emergency leave, which our panel director is going to go over under item number 4 on our agenda tonight. We felt that as a committee that it was important that the full council hear all the facts at one time. So they're going to do a presentation to us. Before you is item number 3 on our tonight's agenda that we did move up to full council. And the last item that you're not seeing on tonight's agenda is the audit that last common council meeting we were presented the 2019 audit. The company is asking for an additional cost of $3,500. The mayor, along with our committee, felt that that needed to be looked into more in this situation that we're all in, that they're requesting an additional $3,500 beyond their accepted contract. So Ginny will get back to us at our next meeting on that. Any questions? I will take them. I also wanted everybody to know that the airport commission is still alive and doing well. It's we've had some membership changes, and we are having our first meeting for 2021 tomorrow night. Dave Merzik, you have a question for me?
Yeah, I do. Did they, well, I could ask Ginny, I suppose, but what was the rationale for an additional charge over and above the contract?
Well, first of all, the amount that they quoted for the 2019 audit was given to the city 5 years ago. And also with the COVID and the remote work, it made it more time intensive by trying to do the audit fully remote. And because it was more time intensive, as you're aware, David, you bill by the hour for professional services. I want you to know that I asked them for the detail of comparison of what their quote was versus what they actually were involved in as far as time. I know that some of the questions from the committee were savings on travel and meals because they didn't have to do that. But I'm pretty sure that I've asked from the partner for a detailed analysis compared to the quote. But 5 years ago, they weren't thinking that there was going to be COVID and remote work and everybody being isolated and having to pick up the audit more than just a week condensed time. So it was just more expensive as far as the amount of time having to put in. We did a lot of things remotely that took many hours over the computer versus had they been on site with their normal process. So I asked them for the detailed analysis of how much more time was put in. They have given me that. I'm going to pay the final bill based on the contract price. And I told them that I would bring it to the finance committee for an adjustment to be considered.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me know when you're done with questions, since I can't see anybody, and I'll continue with the agenda.
I believe we're all done, Gary.
Okay, thanks. Okay, then I will now read through the consent agenda. Fortunately, it's a short agenda with only 3 motions. Motion that the council approves the minutes of the regular meeting held January 5, 2021. 2, motion that the council approves the warrants totaling $1,762,633.18. And the same be placed on the Director of Finance's desk for payment as presented. And 3, motion that the council approves Paul Kelsey to the position of Buildings and Grounds Maintenance Worker at a base annual salary of $32,393. This is a CSEA grade 7. It would be effective January 20th, 2021. And of course, is subject to the satisfaction of all applicable service requirements. If anybody wants any of those 3 items removed from the consent agenda, don't raise your hand because I can't see you, just shout it out. Okay, I don't hear anything. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as is. Somebody just shout it out.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I think that was, sound like Dave Risberger moved. Second, I'm going to guess was Mark Drenick.
Yep.
All right, I'm getting good at voices. The, okay, I will call the roll. Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Councilmember Davies,
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Lepari Shu,
Aye.
Councilmember Carson,
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter is not here, Councilmember Drennick.
Aye.
Okay, that passes, thank you. Okay, and now we're going to jump down to, I don't have a motion prepared for this. There may be one after the discussion. So I guess I'll turn it over to Katie Betker to discuss paid pandemic leave.
So I had issued an internal memorandum about this just because there was a lot of background that I thought kind of needed to be gone through, and I will summarize it now. But of course, if there's any questions or concerns, at any point, feel free to speak up. So in general, the topic of paid pandemic leave, what we're talking about is paid leave that keeps an employee whole on their pay when they are missing work for reasons relating to the pandemic. And this is time that an employee would not be required to use their accruals. So again, it's just time that we are granting to the employee in excess of a paid time off accrual. So at the beginning of the pandemic, in the spring of 2020, there was federal and state legislation that was passed that when taken together, it created a pretty broad leave category for non-discretionary time that the city was required to give for certain instances. So the state legislation is the New York State Quarantine Paid Sick Law, which is referred to the New York State as the New York State Q Law, which provides an employee with up to, it's the number of hours that the employee would typically work during a 14-day period, which for the most part is 10 paid days of leave for most full-time workers. Obviously, if you're a part-time worker, it would be fewer hours. So that is for people who are under an isolation or a quarantine order, which means that either the employee themselves is ill and under a local health department isolation order, or they have been identified as a close contact of a sick person, which would put them under a quarantine order. So there's no changes effective in January to the New York State Quarantine Leave Act. So the city is still required, it's non-discretionary, we are still required to provide that leave time moving into 2021. Now, on the federal side, we have the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which is the federal legislation. That piece of legislation sunset on December 31st. And how this differs from the state law is that it provides 80 hours of paid sick leave to an employee, but for expanded reasons outside, above and beyond what the state legislation provides. Those reasons are if the person is subject to a state or local quarantine or isolation order due to COVID-19, which is identical to the New York State law, or if the employee was advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to a health concern, or the person was experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and was seeking a medical diagnosis, 4, if they were caring for an individual who was seeking such a diagnosis or experiencing symptoms. The 5th reason is if you are a parent of a child whose school was closed or daycare or other place of education was closed due to a pandemic related reason, or any other substantially similar conditions as determined by Health and Human Services. So that I go through all that just so you understand that when taken together, that's a very broad category. So with sufficient justification and sufficient documentation since the beginning of the pandemic, employees could apply to Greg and I, who were, kind of co-manage this leave for any of those reasons to take up to, it was, the leave prescribed. So 10 days on the state side and an additional 10 days on the federal side if conditions warranted. So the updates in 2021 are that, again, the federal law has sunset. Some municipalities are voluntarily electing to continue the federal benefit, which is why we're bringing it to your attention. When in my mind, if a program sunsets, it goes away. But when I kind of got wind from a lot of my colleagues across the state that some places were, bringing this to their legislatures to consider voluntarily extending it, I did want to bring it to your attention because that's, the city would effectively adopt a policy voluntarily extending the benefit. That said, Jenny and I have taken a really, really close look at, the leave time that's been utilized since the beginning of the pandemic, kind of the trends, what are people using the time for, under which program does it fall? And for the most part, it looks like in the beginning of the pandemic, we had people really using the broad category FFCRA time. It was, school closures. There was a lot of uncertainty with daycare, childcare. There were a lot of concerns about, what will the pandemic look like? What does my doctor tell me I should do? Should I stay out of work? Shouldn't I? Now that things have kind of, not certainly minimizing because it is still, a horrible global pandemic. But now that we understand a little bit more about what the impacts of this look like, that time has steadily dwindled since the beginning, since the inception. So right now, 9 times out of 10, when we have an employee who needs to use leave time related to the pandemic, that all falls under the New York State Quarantine Leave Act. So Ginny and I together, when we review the financial impact along with, how generously applied this time has been at your direction for our employees to keep their pay whole in 2020 and a variety of other reasons, Ginny and I wanted to make the joint recommendation to you that you consider kind of adopting our own leave policy that would encompass a couple things. First, obviously, as I mentioned, the New York State Q law time, the 10 paid days, is not discretionary. We will continue to do that until the law ceases to exist and or some other circumstance arises where it no longer applies. The federal leave, because our employees for the most part have such generous benefit packages, a lot of vacation time, we give personal time, we give sick time that can be used to care for a family member or due to the illness of the employee. And also because utilization has been fairly low over the course of the last few months or so, Jenny and I are not recommending that we continue the federal leave. However, we would like to add 2 caveats to this that fall outside of either of these policies. So this would be leave granted at the city's own authority. So right now, vaccination is a huge topic of conversation. And the city's official position on this, of course, is that we're encouraging all employees, out of a strong sense of social responsibility to get vaccinated. So in order to, we're educating, we're holding webinars, with Dr. Jorgensen, we've, had multiple meetings, we're trying to put information into people's hands. So our approach to this is kind of 3-pronged with vaccinations. Educate through webinars, through providing information, encourage, provide support to people, and also we want to incentivize. So we're proposing that we would like to be able to adopt a policy where at my discretion, we would be able to give employees up to 16 hours, which is roughly the equivalent of 2 paid days of time for any employee who wants to get a vaccine. And that would cover time away from work to get the vaccine. And also, in some cases where employees, experience side effects or symptoms after receiving a vaccine, if they were not to feel well and couldn't come to work for whatever reason. So I don't anticipate everybody using up to 16 hours, but we'd like to make that time available to our folks for those reasons. The second case that falls outside of the Q law or the federal leave is pooled testing. It's the pooled saliva testing, which, we've talked to you about before. We're getting up and running in that in our public safety departments. The police sergeants and the fire union have both agreed to get that started. We're hoping to have that in place for February 1st. And so what happens is, and Diane or Greg can explain this a lot more technically than I can, but employees are pooled together, and then they do a weekly saliva swab sample. And then that pool is tested as a group. And then if there is no presence of the coronavirus, then the pool tests negative, we take no more action. If the pool tests positive, then what we would like to do is immediately, have the ability at the discretion of the department head to send those employees home until we can isolate who the ill person is. So Diane or Greg, maybe one of you can explain the way pool testing works a little bit better than me. Many of you are probably familiar with the concept because it's something that they've done well and successfully at SUNY. Diane, do you want to?
Of course, yes. So pool testing as an option for our first responders was a way we could do what's called surveillance testing, meaning testing asymptomatic people who would be very important to know if they were positive, both for their own safety and for the safety of the public. So, and initially we were going to partner with SUNY, but then we have been offered a direct link to the lab, the Quadrant Bioscience Lab, which is associated with SUNY Upstate, for this very sensitive, good test that is cost effective because we pool the samples. So we're going to do it with pools of 6. So everyone produces just a swab of saliva, basically, that gets a portion of it is saved and then a portion of it is pooled so that the lab only needs to run one test. And if it's negative, it's negative. If it's positive, then there will be this, we think, 24 to 36 hour window where we've told everyone in that positive pool that there is a potential that they're positive. Now, they don't necessarily need to not work. That, again, will be at the discretion of their chiefs, but it may make sense it is recommended that they quarantine awaiting the final result. But given that these people are essential workers, there is also an option to continue working and just quarantine on your personal time. For the fire people, since they at work are so close together, they may choose, and it may be best if they in fact do not work during that period of time when they're waiting for the final result. Is that pretty much it, Katie and Greg?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you so much. Like I said, I knew you'd have a way better explanation than I would on that. But ultimately, what we're getting at here is that we want to adopt a leave policy that, from the beginning, this has all been about protecting our employees, keeping them healthy, keeping them safe, and their families, which obviously then enables them to continue to provide, the vital, important services to the community that we need. So it is with that in mind that we're making these recommendations to you. So I know that was a lot of information. I know I probably didn't explain it all very well, but ultimately what we're looking for is to continue the New York State leave, 10 days for quarantine or isolation order, which we are required to do. That's compulsory, but adopt a separate policy that would allow, in certain circumstances, time away from work, paid emergency leave for purposes of vaccination with a 16-hour maximum cap, with appropriate documentation. I mean, it would not be, subject to significant abuse. And then for positive pool testing, as Diane indicated. So with that, questions, comments, concerns?
Katie, do you need one of us to make a motion for that, since it looks like we're in uncharted water?
Sure. So the motion, granted, I wasn't really, I didn't prepare one, but the motion would be to approve, the recommendation issued jointly by the personnel director and the finance director to adopt a paid emergency leave policy as presented, which would be pretty much identical to what I've discussed with you and what was issued in the memorandum to you on Friday.
Katie, may I ask just a quick clarifying question? And I know you said this, but it went over my head a little bit, so I apologize. Just still stay in effect until we potentially might need to revisit it again?
Sure. So it would be my, if I understand the question correctly, I mean, what would the duration be of this policy? And it would be the intention that it would remain in effect, through the conclusion of the pandemic. Obviously, the need for vaccinations aren't going away, or until some other state, local, or federal action was taken that would nullify or otherwise end these policies. If the New York State Quarantine Leave Act expires, I'm just giving an arbitrary date, but if the state government decides to end it on March 1st, then of course the city would, no longer be under the obligation to continue giving that leave. So we would of course come back to you with a recommendation or a discussion at that point. But I would suggest that we leave this policy in place, through the conclusion of the pandemic or as otherwise determined, by the state, federal government.
Thank you, Katie.
So Katie, are you looking for a motion to be passed on this tonight?
If possible, to adopt the leave policy as presented, that would be great, only because, the vaccinations are available. We're trying to get started with our pool testing. So if we could have this in place effective almost immediately, that would be extraordinarily helpful.
I'll move that motion.
Does anybody? Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, so I had Carson moving it, Harrington seconding it. Discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote. Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Aye.
I think you meant
Don't-
Katie Lepari shoe.
Oh. Okay. Councilmember Katie Lepari Shoe.
Well, now I'll answer.
Still
Aye.
aye.
Okay, Carson.
Aye.
Okay. Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter, I believe, is still not here. Councilmember Drenick.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. I apologize for that. I'm flying purely on instruments here, so I have no visual content.
Well,
Okay,
Gary, in
ahead.
the world of avionics, that's called IFR. So
which is supposed to be better, more accurate.
it's supposed to lead us in there.
That's good. Okay, if anybody has any additional business they want to raise, please just go ahead and do so.
Mayor, I actually do, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
So I actually want to kind of go back up to the presentation about the transit hub tonight. And I just want to make sure I completely understand this. When we first started out, we had 3 options from the Wendell presentation. I think option 3 was like 22.5 million. Option 2 was 15.2 million, and option 1, I believe, was 10.3 million. I would just like to make sure that we're staying between option 1 and 2 in the RFP. That for further, since the council hasn't really decided which option to go with between 1 and 2, that we get both those options listed in the RFP.
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, option 3, if I recall, is off the table because it depended upon us being able to acquire property that we're not able to acquire. I think that there were probably 7 options that were discussed with Wendell. Most of them fell apart because it required acquiring different property. There was property owned by the hotel, property owned by the credit union, and so on. So all other options in 1 and 2 are off the table.
Okay, that sounds great, Gary, that we're going to keep option 1 and option 2 in the RFP moving forward. So that just gives the council a little flexibility moving down the road.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, we will work with the consultant who will, give us advice. And option 1 will always be a backup option. Absolutely.
Right, but I mean, ultimately, we would have to come up with the money for the study. If we end up saying option 2 is just too expensive for us right now, we would end up having to pay for an architectural study for option 1 then, right? Whereas right now, the option is being paid for.
I'll ask Greg to weigh in on this. I mean, I imagine we could do the study for both options, but that's going to cost significantly more money, I would imagine. Greg?
Yeah, so I think sooner than later, and not tonight, but we need to come to a decision on which option to really pursue in detailed design, because detailed design, ultimately, the end product of that is going to be construction documents ready to go to bid. So we wouldn't want to progress both options all the way to that level, incurring maybe twice the cost of just going with one. But as far as in the RFP, we can include both of those options and then try to come up with a schedule with whoever the selected consultant is to narrow down which option we really do want to pursue early in that detailed design process. I mean, really, the conceptual planning process was intended to get to a preferred alternative. It didn't necessarily have to be the final alternative, but I think the longer we string things out, we're just going to incur more costs than if we were able to come to a decision. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So then if we start the preliminary RFP, then at some point we could have a special meeting for this council to really openly discuss the 2 options then, right, Greg?
Yeah. Jenny's got her hand up too. I see her there.
Yes, Mayor, I do have a input. Am I allowed to speak?
I can't stop you, Jenny.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I just wanted to let the council members and the mayor know that I do not support option 3. It's just too expensive. So I would not be making any recommendations to find funding for that option. Also, I agree with Greg. If the RFP goes out for both option 1 and 2, it's going to significantly increase the engineering costs. As it is right now, for to do one RFP for whatever option we end up choosing, the grant funds that we have will cover it. But if you ask them to extend it, and Greg, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if they have to do both options, it would be significantly higher, and I would not want to waste the grant funds on just having information on the 2 different projects. So as Greg said, if we narrow down the specs for the RFP that they're going to be working on, it will behoove the city to save as much money as we can on that process.
Greg, do you agree with that?
100%. I mean, I think ideally, if we had, perfect world had made a decision at this point heading into the RFP for detailed design as to what site we're going with, that would be the best. If we're not certain on that, then I think we build into the RFP that as part of their proposal, they evaluate the 2 concepts that we have and basically make their recommendation. And we really nail that down early in the process before we go very far into it with detailed design. So I might ask, as the mayor suggested before, either right now is fine, or in an email to me or a phone call, what exactly it is that you're looking for, additional information that would help make your decision, as far as which way to go, that we can make sure we include that in the RFP. See Mark Trenick with it.
Yeah,
I think one of the, I'm sorry, go ahead. I can't see who's raising. Go ahead.
So it's Mark Trenick. So if we connected with you, Greg, with our questions, and then there's not a huge rush to get this done in the next month, is there? If we were to have a conversation about this in some depth, the council, relative to the various things that we've been able to ask and then receive, answers to, and be able to progress from there, maybe make a decision in a month's time, or even earlier if it was a special session of the council that was called for that purpose.
Do you mean before issuing an RFP?
Yes, yes. So I mean, you're not locked and loaded and looking to get an RFP out there next week, right? Or are you?
No, we'd be looking to develop the RFP next couple of weeks and get that out as soon as we can.
So potentially we could solicit some answers to questions that we might have, and then maybe meet as a group, I guess outside of the council meeting, maybe as a special meeting to discuss and determine what the option was that we were going to go with, and then within the time frame that you needed for to be able to put together that RFP. So within a couple of weeks' time, that would work.
Yeah, I think if we're going to have more discussion, that basically pushes everything off until we have that discussion. I guess we can't really develop an RFP if not knowing what to include in it.
So we could expedite. We can get with you with our questions, then maybe arrange a conversation as council outside of our normal council meeting, and make a decision so that you can pursue the RFP.
Okay.
Also, if I understand the conversation, oh, go ahead, Mayor.
No, I should say one of the time constraints, Mark, is that we want to time the repair of the parking garage, have flexibility to time the repair of the parking garage around the construction on Deet Street. So the more flexibility we have in timing, the better. The other thing is to keep in mind that I would advise against contracting with the architecture and engineering firm to pay to do in-depth study on option one without us knowing that there is not a fatal flaw in going forward with option one, which is the ability of it to be approved by the Planning Commission in the conducting the seeker without documentation that demonstrates that there will not be a negative impact on the loss of those up to 80 parking spaces. We don't want to spend $100,000 or more on a study that we then take a proposal to the Planning Commission and they perform the seeker and they disapprove it.
Sorry, Gary, it's Len. I'm raising my hand. So does that mean we really should just go ahead and call for a special meeting for this council to discuss the options openly rather than continue going tonight?
Well, here are choices. You can go ahead and do an RFP for developing option two. You can go ahead and do an RFP for developing option one. Again, I have real concerns about committing that kind of money for something we don't even know if can be approved. You can go back to square one and look for other options if neither of those are desirable. Or there may be a way of, and Greg, you would have to look into this. Can you do an RFP that for option two that only takes it part way to give us more information about final costs and design without getting into the whole detailed construction drawings, where we don't spend all the money, but spend some money that gets us to the point where we could make a better decision?
You know, similar to what we're doing with Glenwood, or what we did with the Glenwood Creek project, where we had engineering progress to a certain level to get a better cost estimate, and then we came back and reevaluated and decided to go with the project. You know, you could do something like that where you're looking at both options, but I can't say now without speaking to Wendell, who's, you know, and thinking about this thing, you know, how much expense would they anticipate would have to be incurred to, you know, by whatever consultant, whether it's them or another consultant, how far into the design do we have to be able to get a more confident estimate? You know, typically you need to go at least 30% or more.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
You know, Len, if you want to seriously consider going with the option one, I would suggest that the very first step would be to put together the data for the Planning Commission and get an advance preliminary approval from them on it, because I would strongly, you know, be against spending $200,000 on a study that we do not know we have the data that would satisfy the Planning Commission in giving their site plan and seeker approval.
Mayor, I have my hand up.
Yeah, go ahead. Speak, Jenny.
Thank you. I just wanted to give the council members and the mayor an idea of what the engineering costs are going to be. According to Wendell, it's about 9% of the estimated cost of the project. So option one is going to be over $900,000. Option two is going to be over 1.2 million. So we're talking about very expensive money here as far as doing the actual engineering part of this project. So to spend additional money on looking at option one versus option two, I think it wouldn't be just a couple $100,000. I could be off on my numbers, but I think it would be, Greg and I were talking earlier today, to look at both options, it would probably be 30% of the work would take them up to 1 point, but then it would split out by analyzing option one and option two. So I think it would be significant dollars. And from the conversation that we had earlier at the beginning of this meeting, we strongly recommended option two, and then for council members' input on how to modify option two or how to meet your concerns about option two. That would be my recommendation for this process as far as money-wise, and you know, you can take it from there, but that would be my suggestion.
Gary, can I offer my opinion on this? I'll make it short. For me, I look at option one, and yes, it's cheaper. But for me, option one is going to take, what is it, 80 spaces out of the parking garage? Is that correct, Gary?
I think we had an estimate of 50 to 70 or something like that. Greg, do you have the number?
We're looking at, in the next couple of years, the potential of upwards of 100 new apartments downtown, between upper floor apartments and then the Deet Street lofts. And we're also talking about renting out some of the parking spaces in the parking garage to the Deet Street lofts, since we don't want them to be using the Deet Street parking lot. We've already lost, because of the lofts, we're going to lose spaces in the Deet Street parking lot, and that's gone through the Planning Commission already, and they gave their approval, and we have enough to lose there. But to lose another 80 spots in the parking garage when we potentially have, you know, 100 to 200 new people living downtown, many with cars, I think we're going to be kicking ourselves if we go with option one. I personally can't go forward with that. I would rather go with the option two, and with possible modifications as we see it and discuss the plans amongst ourselves.
Mayor, if I can, it's Mark Dronick.
Yeah, please do.
All right, thank you. So for what it's worth, option two is in fact the option that I'd be voting for were revoting, specifically because of the parking, spaces. We can't afford to lose the parking spaces. I think that the concern that I have, and I think maybe Len and a couple of others may share, is that there's a process whereby certainly, those of us who are financially oriented, I'm certainly not one of those folks, but there are some folks who want to know that all of our costs, all of our legacy costs, everything has been looked at and determined, and then following that, a decision is made by council, as opposed to something where council is told that this is the option that really we need to go with. Even though I might agree with, in fact, I do agree with option 2 being the way we want to go, that there's a precedent that I've got some concern that we don't simply bypass council and have us say, okay, you've done the hard thinking for us, so we'll rubber stamp something. And I'm not accusing anybody of anything here. I think it's just a precedent that is worth noting, and that if it delays the process for a week's time, or potentially even less, for Len specifically and others to have their questions answered so that they can feel some comfort level about moving forward with the decision to go with, again, I believe that option 2 is the best one, but that is something that they feel comfortable about because they've got all the facts and figures, then I feel like a couple of days worth of delay is worth it. And again, I'm hesitant to allow this to be a precedent. In this particular case, I think it's benign, but you never know where that leads.
Mark, that's fine. I think there's 2 issues here, though, that maybe at least are overlapping or somewhat confusing to me to separate. One is that, unfortunately, sometimes you have to invest a considerable amount of money before you know whether you can do a project or not, which is what happens at every level. A private developer, for example, Ken Carney invested hundreds of $1,000s of his money before he decided whether it was feasible and made sense for him to pursue the lofts on Deed Street. So until we invest $100,000 or so in this architectural study, we will not fully know all of the details of the project, how much it exactly cost, and be able to make a decision as to whether we want to go with it or not. That's just a reality. Our first step is to decide to commit the money. Fortunately, we have the grant money to cover it, but still that money has to be invested first. The other issue between the 2 options is as to whether option 1 is really a viable option to be considered, because the loss of parking spaces, regardless of opinions on it, may be a deal breaker, and probably is a deal breaker. In my mind, it's a deal breaker, that if you lived through the approval of the lofts on Deed Street, you knew how much time and detail was placed into studying the availability of parking spaces before approving it, which include relying upon a professional parking study that was done. I honestly would be uncomfortable even taking this to knowing what they went through, and in order to approve that, taking another 80 reduction in parking spaces to them, I would feel almost certain, with the data we have, would not be approved. So I don't even know if we can consider option 1 a viable option, despite the fact that it's less expensive.
Mayor, it's Scott. I got one hold up, dude. Well, I got a couple questions or thoughts or something. I don't know what you want to call them. It's getting late, and I apologize. Do we know when we're going to get ready to start tearing down the building? Number 1, and then number 2, what kind of reserve funds are we going to have for that if we get into some type of where we have to clean up that property and how are we going to come up with money to do so? And because that could potentially wipe this whole project out.
I can answer the first question. I can't answer the second question. The first question is, we hope demolition of the building to take place in early spring. The answer to the second question, I don't have an answer to that. Maybe Jenny does.
No, Mayor, right at the moment, I do not. I asked the question if we thought we were going to have to clean up the grounds, and it was estimated at the time when the demolition was looked at that they weren't predicting that that was going to happen. So as of right now, I don't have any information to work with or any estimated dollars to even give a suggestion for.
Yeah, the grant that we received is $477,000. That number came from a preliminary study that was done on the analysis of what needed to be cleaned up there and what it was projected that the demolition and cleanup would cost. Scott, are there ever unknowns? Sure there are.
It's Mark Davies, if I can jump in here. So I guess here's what I'm struggling with, and it's going to come with a request that might help me to begin to kind of resolve this. I'm struggling with the irony of discussing parking spaces, but yet we've talked about a transit hub that will increase ridership. So on one hand, the transit hub will, create more opportunities for mass transit of people and potentially reduce the number of vehicles that are needed within our city. But yet we're making a decision based on 50 to 80 parking spots. And on the other hand, then what we're doing is we are utilizing a particular amount of square foot in that particular lot that might be available to developer down the road, where we'd have certainly a larger footprint to be able to sell, to tax. So I'm just struggling with the kind of thinking about what's the long-term vision here, what's best for the city in the long term. I think the ask is that I appreciate the work that the four of you have done. I know you've probably put in, and the mayor kept saying, 2 years of work, but certainly a lot of work lately. If there's any numbers that you have, if there's any information that you have compiled, I'd love to read that. It might help me, inform my thinking a little bit more about what option is best, option one or option two.
One of the struggles we have, Mark, here is that, one, we're looking to have more people here. More people means more cars. We're looking to, hopefully the trend across the country, across the world, is to move away from cars. Either it's driverless cars or public transportation. The problem that we have here in Oneonta is that even though we have an outstanding public transportation system, it gets you around Oneonta. Oneonta is a bit of an island when it comes to public transportation, is that if you don't own a car, you can't leave Oneonta unless we can, possibly push zip cars, car rentals. Who knows how successful that will be. But a lot of times people have cars only because they have no way of leaving Oneonta, going any place outside of Oneonta. So we're going to be one of the last communities to really see people move away from cars compared to communities that are better connected with the outside world than we are.
Gary, it's Len again. I agree with Mark Drenick. I kind of, no disrespect to the city staff, but I just feel like we're getting bypassed at this moment. And council, we haven't really openly discussed two different options. I thought we were just getting a presentation. It was our responsibility to go and look at the presentation, which I'm sure we all did. And I thought we were just gathering more information. And then at some point we were going to have open dialogue amongst all of us of which option we wanted to go with. Like your suggestion about going to the planning commission, I don't know how much work is involved. If it's just a simple ask, and Danny Lappin and his group will take a look at the parking study. I don't know. I mean, I think of where we're headed on Deed Street and what we're giving up there, and then we're talking about taking on other properties. And so for me, I went back to that Wendell presentation, the final draft, and I might have missed it, but I didn't see where they answered my question about legacy costs. We still don't know how much it's going to cost the city taxpayers on an annual basis just to maintain the parking garage to this new standard. And we definitely don't know how much this new building on 27 Market Street is going to cost us. From the one little small drawing, I see where the new transit center, David, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm reading that building is 6,000 square feet, but in option one, we're only going to take a transactional section of 3,000 square feet. I was just a little confused about that. That's the kind of information I thought we were going to get tonight and go kind of down into the weeds and then come back and we were as a council going to discuss this. I just, I appreciate everybody's time tonight. I know it's getting late, so I don't know, Gary, where you want to go.
How would you like, well, no, it's not where I want to go. It's, how would you like to proceed? I mean, nobody wants to make a commitment to any project until you know all of the details, until you know all of the costs. The reality is that the only way we will know all of the details and all of the costs is to go through the process with an architectural and engineering company who will provide us with all of that, and then we make a decision as to whether we want to go through with the project or not. So really the question on the table now is nobody wants to decide, yes, we definitely want to build option one or option two or anything else, because we don't have the information to say definitely. The question now is, do you want to have an architectural and engineering company give you all of the data and information and costs for option two? Or do you want to have an architectural and data and engineering company give you all of the costs for option one? Or do you want to pay them to do both? I mean, or like there may be, Greg can explore a hybrid where they can take it up to a certain point to give us more data without incurring the full cost, and then to give us more information. But again, that will cost us more money to do than just focusing on one. So those really, those are the choices. It's really not about deciding on an option now. It's deciding about which option do you want to dig into to get more information about.
Yeah, agreed, Gary. I mean, again, I would love to take on option number two, but knowing that we can't sell the new building to a potential developer, I guess we could enter into a 99-year lease with them, but we're limiting our options for that footprint. And when we first agreed to move down that road, that was a strong option. And I understand things change throughout the year, but I don't, Greg, for me, I guess I turn to you and say, can we explore a little bit more, or do you have what Mark Davies was just saying? Do you have more of this data? Like I said, I might have missed it within the Wendell final draft, but I just don't see where they answered all these questions.
Yeah, maybe if the council would send a list of questions, specific data you're looking for, we'll pull together whatever we can now at the intermediate or going to the RFP process.
And I agree with you. I don't think Wendell answered all the questions. I think their job was to give a very preliminary picture And then we take it from there to get all of the questions answered and all the details.
So Gary, do you think instead of moving forward on an RFP, we should just table this until we can get our questions to Greg, or what do you think?
That's fine. I mean, if you want to, if people want to, on the course of the next 2 weeks, provide questions to Greg, and Greg can see if he has answers to them or not, and see how that plays into next steps, that's fine. Greg, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, that's fine. I can answer anything you'd like to the best of my ability at this point. Obviously, just understanding that being this early in the development of a design of a building, we can't nail down the exact building maintenance costs and that kind of thing to the nth degree, but we can talk about that at a high level for sure.
Yeah, ultimately, we have to take a leap of faith in spending money. Fortunately, it's grant money on an in-depth study in order to know exactly what the building is going to cost us in every way, and what's going to be involved in the engineering of it and the construction of it, so that we can make a final decision.
Agreed. And as the city, if we're going to go down this path of developing property, then we want to make sure our ROI is there also. So thank you for leading this option.
So is everybody comfortable with that? Is anybody not comfortable with that? Assume everybody's still on the line. Everybody still awake?
It's fine, Gary.
Okay, so we'll let's set 2 weeks, get questions to Greg, and then we'll see what outcomes come out of those questions, and decide the next step.
Can I ask a quick process question?
Sure, it sounds like Katie.
It is me. How'd you know?
Well, you disguised your voice before, and I thought you were Len.
I was just wondering, I would obviously, I think similar to Mark, I think the more information that I have before just in general about this topic would be very helpful. And so my process question is, what does that communication look like with Greg? I would love the opportunity to also get the answers to questions that my fellow council members ask, just so I have as much information as possible going into this decision.
Yeah, of course. Greg can compile the questions and share the questions with what he's able and his answers with everybody.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks, Greg, for doing that for us.
Well,
I didn't hear him agree to it, but thanks, Greg, anyways.
that sounds good.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, yeah, just a little history is that the Wendell came up with option 1 first. That's why it's called option 1. And, it looked good. And then they mentioned that, well, you're going to lose up to 100 parking spaces, which is what they first said. And we said, wait a minute, that's a deal breaker. We can't lose 100 parking spaces. You need to see if you can figure out how to overcome that. They came back and they said, well, we can cut it down to 70 maybe, but we can't get away with out losing a large number of parking spaces. And that's when we said, well, you better come up with another option. Anything else? Okay. If I'm not hearing anything else, if there's nothing else, then I'm going to say, unless I hear any objections, that we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night, folks.
Night, everybody.
Everybody.